Time now is 7:40 p.m. Today is Sunday, July 5th, 2026. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Psychology, 4th edition. Narrated by Omar Mohsen Ibrahim Fouad. The time now is 10:11 p.m. The date today is Tuesday, July 7th, 2026. Chapter 9, Motivation and Emotion. Chapter outline and learning objectives. Motivation. Define motivation. Explain how extrinsic and intrinsic motivation impact behavior. Describe drive reduction theory and explain how it relates to motivation. Explain how arousal theory relates to motivation. Outline Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Sexuality. Describe the human sexual response as identified by Masters and Johnson. Define sexual orientation and summarize how it develops. Hunger. Discuss how the stomach and the hypothalamus makes us feel hungry. Emotion. Define emotions and explain how they differ from moods. List the major theories of emotion and describe how they differ. Discuss evidence supporting the idea that emotions are universal. Describe the amygdala's role in the experience of fear. Summarize evidence pointing to the biological basis of happiness. Motivation. Rio at last, September 17th, 2016. Yvonne Mosquera Schmidt took her place at the starting line of the 1,500-meter race for blind female athletes at the 2016 Paralympics. She had been dreaming of this moment for decades, and the journey had been long and hard. Just 2 years before, Yvonne had been diagnosed with cancer for the 3rd time in her life. Sitting in the doctor's office with tears streaming down her face, she vowed, "Whatever happens, I have to make it to Rio." Despite the shock, fear, and anger of facing cancer, Yvonne held on to the idea that she was a warrior. A small warrior at 88 pounds, but a warrior no less. It's not about how big we are, says Yvonne. It's about how strong we are. Yvonne has been a fighter all her life. When she was 2 years old, doctors removed both of her eyes to stop the spread of an aggressive cancer. She is completely blind and has no memory of vision, but that hasn't stopped her from doing much of anything. Growing up in New York City, Yvonne used to ride her bicycle across the George Washington Bridge, her father running alongside. She went to school with sighted kids, climbed trees in the park, and studied ballet, tap, and jazz dance. According to Bosella 2012, InMotion.net ND. A year after earning her undergraduate degree in mathematics from Stanford University, Yvonne took up running with the help of trainers, guides, and her husband, John. She has turned herself into a world-class runner and triathlete, racking up records and titles all over the globe. In Rio, Yvonne showed her warrior strength and did her country proud, earning 6th place in the 1500 meters. Paralympian Yvonne Mosquera Schmidt on the right and her guide Kyle Ward at the 2016 Paralympics in Rio. Representing the United States in the Paralympics is just one of Yvonne's extraordinary athletic feats. She won 2 gold medals in the Paratriathlon World Championships and nabbed first place in the women's visually impaired category of the Boston Marathon 3 times, according to InMotion.net ND. But athletic accomplishments are only part of what makes Yvonne so phenomenal. Did we mention that she speaks 4 languages, climbs mountains, and has a graduate degree in business? Despite her blindness and repeated battles with cancer, Yvonne has garnered more achievements and life experiences than we can count. How does she do it? There is little doubt that Yvonne is blessed with intelligence, athletic ability, and other remarkable gifts. But these are not only the ingredients in the recipe for outstanding achievement. Motivation is essential too, according to Bardak ETAL 2020, McCoach and Flake 2018, and Reefsteck ETAL 2016. Note: quotations attributed to Yvonne Mosquera Schmidt and Ibrahim Hashi are personal communications. What is motivation? LO1 define motivation. Psychologists propose that motivation is a stimulus or force that can direct the way we behave, think, and feel. A motivated behavior is guided, has a direction, energized, and persistent. When Yvonne is training, her behavior is guided because she sets goals, like meeting certain running times, energized because she goes after those goals with zeal, and persistent because she sticks with her goals even when challenges arise. We exhibit behaviors all the time, but motivated behaviors are different from behaviors that are simply reactions to environmental stimuli. In this chapter, you will learn about various forms of motivation and theories that attempt to explain them. Keep in mind that human behavior is complex and should be studied in context. Keep in mind that human behavior is complex and should be studied in the context of Keep in mind that human behavior is complex and should be studied in the context of biology, culture, and other environmental factors. Every behavior is likely to have a multitude of causes, according to Maslow, 1943. Does learning play a role? One way to explain motivated behavior is through learning theory. We know that people, not to mention dogs, chickens, and slugs, can learn behaviors through classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning chapter. Let's take a look at how operant conditioning can help us understand the relationship between learning and motivation. When a behavior is reinforced with positive or negative reinforcers, an association is established. This association between a behavior and its consequence becomes the incentive, or reason you are motivated to repeat the behavior. Imagine you have been avoiding a particular term paper assignment. You decide to treat yourself to an hour of watching Netflix for every 3 pages you write. Adding a reinforcer, Netflix increases your writing behavior, thus we call it a positive reinforcer. The association between the behavior writing and the consequence watching your favorite show is the incentive. Before long, you begin to expect this break from work, which motivates you to write. Do you think Yvonne's running behavior was shaped by incentives? Connections. In the learning chapter, we introduce positive and negative reinforcers, which are stimuli that increase future occurrences of target behaviors. In both cases, the behavior becomes associated with the reinforcer. Here we learn how these associations become incentives. The power of chocolate. After graduating from college and moving back to New York City, Yvonne started looking for a new activity to get outside and moving. She came across the New York Roadrunners Club, which connected her with an organization that supports and trains runners with all types of disabilities. Having no running experience apart from jogging on a treadmill, Yvonne showed up at a practice one Saturday morning in Central Park and ran 2 miles with one of the running club's guides. The next week she came back for more, and then the next and the next. During these early practices, Yvonne's teammates promised to buy her hot chocolate whenever she increased her distance. Every time they would try to get me to run further, they'd say, "We'll have hot chocolate afterwards." Yvonne remembers. They actually would follow through with their promise. LO2 explain how extrinsic and intrinsic motivation impact behavior. Intrinsic motivation, the idea of being rewarded with hot chocolate, provided Yvonne with an incentive to return to practice again and again. When a learned behavior is motivated by the incentive of external reinforcers in the environment, there is extrinsic motivation to continue that behavior. According to DECI ETAL 1999, 2017, and Ryan and DECI 2017 and 2020. In other words, the motivation comes from consequences that exist outside of the person. Bagels and coffee might provide extrinsic motivation for people to attend a boring meeting. Grades and diplomas for students who Bagels and coffee might provide extrinsic motivation for people to attend a boring meeting, grades, and diplomas for students to work hard in college. For most of us, money is a powerful form of extrinsic motivation. Even the avoidance of punishment can serve as extrinsic motivation, according to Ryan and DECI 2017. The thought of late fees, traffic tickets, and reprimands from authority figures can motivate people to follow rules. Intrinsic motivation. Yvonne's motivation to run also originated from inside. She came to love the sense of freedom running gave her, the experience of being in nature, smelling the grass and feeling the breeze, and sharing it with others. When learned behaviors are driven by personal satisfaction, interest in a subject matter, and other variables that exist within a person, intrinsic motivation is at work. According to DECI ETAL 1999, Rainberg 2020, Ryan and DECI 2017, is reading this textbook inherently interesting? Do you study it carefully because you enjoy the feeling that comes from mastering the material? If so, your reading behavior stems from intrinsic motivation. The reinforcers originate inside of you. Learning feels good and brings you satisfaction, and not from the external environment. For the love of running, Yvonne competes in the 2008 New York City Triathlon. During her early running days, Yvonne's friends reinforced her efforts with hot chocolate. When the incentive to continue a behavior stems from external reinforcers, hot chocolate in this case, the motivation is extrinsic. These days, Yvonne doesn't need sweet treats to keep her running. Her motivation is more intrinsic. She derives pleasure from the activity itself. Extrinsic versus intrinsic. What compels you to offer your seat to someone on a bus? Is it because you've been praised for helping others? Extrinsic motivation, or because it simply feels good to help someone? Intrinsic motivation. Many behaviors are inspired by a blend of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, but there do appear to be potential disadvantages to extrinsic motivation, especially the type that focuses on external rewards and avoidance of punishment, according to Ryan and DECI 2020. Researchers have found that using rewards such as money and marshmallows to reinforce already interesting activities, like doing puzzles, playing word games, and so on, can lead to a decrease in behaviors that were once intrinsically motivating. According to Ryan and DECI 2017, tangible rewards, both material rewards such as pizza parties for reading books and symbolic rewards such as good student awards, are widely advocated by many educators and are used in many classrooms. Yet the evidence suggests that these rewards tend to undermine intrinsic motivation, according to DECI ETAL 2001, page 15. Even athletic scholarships appear to undercut intrinsic motivation, and this effect may persist long after college, influencing athletes feeling toward Even athletic scholarships appear to undercut intrinsic motivation, and this effect may persist long after college, influencing athletes' feelings toward their sports, according to Mahler and Sheldon, 2020. Yet research suggests the link may not be that simple, according to Akin Little and Little, 2019. Extrinsic motivators such as merit-based salary increases do not always erode intrinsic motivation, and the timing of the reward may determine the extent of its impact, according to Gerhardt and Fang, 2015, and Woolley and Fishback, 2018. Put your heads together. Imagine you are a psychology instructor and your goal is to motivate students to perform better on exams. Team up and discuss A, extrinsic motivation strategies you could implement, and B, ways to encourage intrinsic motivation. C, which would be more effective in the long term, and why. We now have developed a basic understanding of what motivation is. We also have established that motivation may be influenced by learning. Let's take a look at some other theories of motivation, keeping in mind that each has its strengths and limitations. Do humans have instincts? Instinct. Surely you've heard the word in everyday conversation. Trust your instincts, people say. That boxer has a killer instinct, a commentator remarks during a pay-per-view fight. But what exactly are instincts? And do humans really have them? Instincts are complex behaviors that are fixed, unlearned, and consistent within a species. Because of instinct, birds migrate to places they have never seen, and insects just know how to find food. According to Liang and Brinkman, 2022, no one teaches the birds where to go or the insects how to search for meals. Through evolution, these behaviors appear to be etched into their genetic makeup. Turtles on a mission. Baby loggerhead sea turtles instinctually crawl toward the ocean after hatching. When the females reach adulthood, they return to the same beach to lay their own eggs, finding their way home with the help of the Earth's magnetic field, according to Lohman et al. 2020. Instincts form the basis of one of the earliest theories of motivation, inspired in part by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Early scholars proposed that a variety of instincts motivate human behavior, according to Kruger and Reckless, 1931, and McDougall, 1912. Thousands of human instincts were named, among them curiosity, flight, and aggressiveness, according to Bernard, 1926, and Kuo, 1921. Yet there was little evidence they were true instincts. That is, complex behaviors that are fixed, unlearned, and consistent within a species. Only a handful of human activists might be considered instincts. One example might be rooting behavior, the tendency for newborns to move their heads and mouths in search of a breast, according to Brimder et al. 2019, Human Development Chapter. But even these are more akin to reflexes than complex activities like nest building in birds. Although instinct theory faded, some of its themes are apparent in the evolutionary perspective, which suggests that evolutionary forces influence human behavior. For example, emotional responses such as fear of snakes, heights, and spiders may have evolved to protect us from danger, according to Langeslag and Van Strien, 2018, and Plumman et al. 2013. Connections. In Chapter 1, we presented the evolutionary perspective, which proposes that humans have evolved adaptive traits through natural selection. Behaviors that improve the chances of survival and reproduction are most likely to be passed along to offspring and therefore tend to increase in frequency. Meanwhile, less adaptive behaviors tend to decrease in frequency. Just staying alive. LO3 describe drive reduction theory and explain how it relates to motivation. In order to survive, living things must maintain internal conditions such as temperature and oxygen levels at a baseline or constant state. Homeostasis refers to the way
in which our bodies maintain these constant states through internal controls, the drive reduction theory proposes that this biological balancing act, homeostasis, is the basis for motivation, according to Hull, 1952. In other words, behaviors are driven by the process of fulfilling basic needs for nutrients, fluids, oxygen, sleep, and so on. Infographic 9.1. Eating, drinking, sleeping, and other behaviors help us meet these physiological needs. If a need is not fulfilled, this creates a drive or a state of tension that pushes us, motivates our behaviors to meet the need and restore equilibrium. Once a need is satisfied, the drive is reduced, but not forever. The need inevitably returns, and we feel driven to meet it once again. A good example is hunger. You wake with an empty stomach, fill it with food, but then find yourself hungry at noon, so you eat lunch. But the hunger returns in the evening, and the cycle continues.
The drive reduction theory helps us understand how physiological needs can be motivators, but it is less useful for explaining why we buy new clothes, go to college, or drive cars too fast. Leaping into the unknown, Yvonne has never been afraid of new experiences. In fact, she has sought out novel and stimulating adventures all her life. I remember even as a little kid wanting to be on roller skates. She says, I was always ready to go down the slide, and I had no idea how long the slide was. At age 8, Yvonne was already using the New York City bus system to get from her elementary school to piano lessons. I would walk over to 5th Avenue and wait for one of the buses, she explains. I would count my steps from the corner of 81st Street toward 80th Street so that I knew where the bus stop was. To determine when it was safe to move into the crosswalk, Yvonne listened for the sound of cars moving in the same direction she wanted to go. Then she would put her cane out and venture forward, looking for some excitement. New experiences can be frightening. They can also be delightfully exhilarating. Humans are fascinated by novelty, and evidence of this innate curiosity pops up in the earliest stages of life. Babies grab, taste, and smell just about everything they can get their hands on. Children fearlessly climb trees and playground structures. Even adults seek out novel experiences, paying money to try out rock climbing, barre classes, or taekwondo. Sometimes boredom motivates us to explore new things, according to Bench and Lynch, 2019. Have you ever visited Wikipedia or YouTube just to learn about something unfamiliar? Why engage in activities that have little, if anything, to do with satisfying basic biological needs? Humans are driven by other types of urges, including the apparent need for stimulation. LO4 explained how arousal theory relates to motivation. According to arousal theory, humans and perhaps other primates seek an optimal level of arousal, as not all motivation stems from physical needs. Arousal or engagement in the world can be product of anxiety, surprise, excitement, interest, fear, and many other emotions. Have you ever had an unexplained urge to make simple changes to your daily routines, like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, eating eggs instead of cereal, or styling your hair differently? These behaviors may stem from your need to increase arousal. Optimal arousal is not the same for everyone. Infographic 9.1. Evidence suggests that some people are sensation seekers. That is, they appear to seek activities that Evidence suggests that some people are sensation seekers. That is, they appear to seek activities that increase arousal, according to Zuckerman, 1979 and 1994. The heritability of this trait appears to be quite high, ranging from 58% to 67%, according to Zuckerman, 2015. Popularly known as adrenaline junkies. These individuals relish activities like cliff diving, popularly known as adrenaline junkies. These individuals relish activities like cliff diving, racing motorcycles, and watching horror movies. A cross-cultural study involving more than 5,000 participants from Africa, North America, South America, Asia, and Europe found that sensation seeking generally rises during the teen years, reaches a maximum around age 19, and then diminishes in the 20s, according to Steinberg et al. 2018. Connections. In the Cognition, Language, and Intelligence chapter, we discuss heritability, the degree to which heredity is responsible for a particular characteristic in a population. The heritability for sensation seeking is 58 to 67%. This means 58 to 67% of the population-wide variation in sensation seeking can be attributed to genes and 33 to 42% to environmental influences. Adrenaline rush. Sensation seeking is most common in middle and late adolescence. During this period, the brain's self-regulatory mechanisms are immature and they won't be fully developed until sometime in the mid-20s. Some have compared it to starting a car's engines before a well-functioning braking system is in place, according to Steinberg et al. 2018, page 2. High sensation seeking is not necessarily a bad thing, as it may be associated with a greater tolerance for stressful events, according to Roberti 2004, and according to some interpretations of the Yerkes-Dodson law. Moderate levels of arousal can actually help performance in humans and other mammals, according to Teigen 1994 and Winton 1987, as well as Yerkes and Dodson 1908. Suppose you are taking an exam. You don't want to be under-aroused because you may fall asleep, nor do you want to be over-aroused as you might have trouble concentrating. You need just the right amount of arousal, somewhere in the moderate range. Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, LO5, outlined Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have you ever been in a car accident, lived through a hurricane, or witnessed a violent crime? At the time, you probably were not thinking about what show you were going to watch on Hulu that night. When physical safety is threatened, everything else tends to take a back seat. This idea that certain needs take priority over others is central to the hierarchy of needs, a theory of motivation proposed by Abraham Maslow, one of many leading figures in the humanistic movement. Henry, 2017. According to Henry, 2017, Maslow organized human needs into a hierarchy often depicted as a pyramid, infographic 9.1. According to Bridgman et al. 2019, these needs, which are both biological and psychological in nature, are considered universal and are ordered according to the strength of their associated drives. Connections. In Chapter 1, we discussed Maslow and his involvement in humanistic psychology. The humanists suggest that people are inclined to grow and change for the better, and this perspective is apparent in the hierarchy of needs. Humans are motivated by the universal tendency to move up the hierarchy and meet needs toward the top. Physiological needs. The most critical needs are situated at the base of the hierarchy and generally take precedence over higher level needs. These physiological needs include requirements for food, water, sleep, and an overall balance of bodily systems. If a life-sustaining need such as fluid intake goes unsatisfied, other needs are placed on hold and the person is motivated to satisfy it. Maslow suggested that the basic physiological needs of people from most societies are relatively well gratified, according to Maslow 1943. But this is not always the case. One example is the widespread need for nutrition. In 2022, almost 13% of households in the United States were food insecure, meaning they had difficulty at some time during the year providing enough food for all their members because of a lack of resources, according to Rabbit ETAL 2023, paragraph 2. Food security ripped away. Volunteers in the Orlando area delivered food aid a few days ahead of Thanksgiving 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic and the job losses it triggered caused many Americans to become food insecure. People who previously had no worries about putting enough food on the table and thus meeting the physiological needs tier in Maslow's hierarchy found themselves waiting in line at food banks. Safety needs. If physiological needs are satisfied, human behavior is motivated by the next level in the hierarchy, safety needs. When Yvonne began cancer treatments as a baby, she had a safe place to stay in New Jersey, but traveling to New York City for chemotherapy and radiation was treacherous. My mother would have to come from New Jersey by herself without knowing English and traipse through the snow and take the buses and the trains to get down to the hospital with me, Yvonne says. During this period, the late 1970s, the city's dark subway tunnels were not the safest place for a mother and baby. In 1979, for example, the subway system saw over 250 felonies per week, according to Samaha 2014. For many people in the United States, safety is equated with the need for predictability and order, having a steady job, a home in a safe neighborhood, health insurance, and living in a country with a stable economy. What does safety mean for you, and how might it differ from that of someone living in Venezuela, Thailand, or Afghanistan? Love and belongingness needs. If safety needs are being met, then people will be motivated by love and belongingness needs. Maslow suggested this includes the need to avoid loneliness, to feel like part of a group, and to maintain affectionate relationships. As a blind child in the mainstream school system, Yvonne did not always have an easy time fitting in. Her parents could not afford all the material things other kids had, but they provided unconditional love, support, and a strong sense of cultural identity. What happens when love and belongingness needs go unsatisfied? People who feel disconnected or excluded may demonstrate less pro-social behavior, according to Twenge ETAL 2007, and act more aggressively and less cooperatively, which only tends to intensify their struggle for social acceptance, according to DeWall ETAL 2008 and Seng ETAL 2014. Yet this effect is reduced when the excluded people think about the future and consider the long-term implications of their actions, according to Balliet and Ferris 2013. The lockdowns associated with the COVID-19 pandemic thrust people across the world into social isolation, threatening their love and belongingness needs. Living under quarantine conditions can foster anxiety, insomnia, moodiness, and other symptoms of psychological disorders, even among people without pre-existing mental health issues. For some, extended quarantine may serve as a traumatic event, triggering symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, psychological disorders chapter, according to Usher ETAL 2020. Esteem needs. If the first three levels of needs are being met, then the individual might be motivated by esteem needs, including the need to be respected by others, to achieve and to have self-respect and feelings of independence. Fulfilling these needs foster a sense of confidence and self-worth, both qualities that Yvonne possessed early in life. In preschool, she was determined to do everything her sighted peers did, from riding a tricycle to pouring her own juice. I remember those little pitchers and cups like it was just yesterday, recalls Yvonne, who was insisted on serving herself. It's me, it's my juice, and I want to pour it. She's always been unstoppable. Yvonne in the center with her family. Even in preschool, Yvonne appeared to be motivated by esteemed needs. She was self-directed, confident, and commanded respect from others. Self-actualization. When the above-mentioned needs are being met, a person can be motivated by what Maslow 1943 called the need for self-actualization, to become more and more what one is, to become everything that one is capable of becoming. Page 382. This need to self-actualize or reach one's fullest potential is at the heart of the humanistic movement. It represents the human tendency toward growth and self-discovery. Personality chapter. For some, self-actualization means becoming the best possible parent. Others aim to be outstanding designers for musicians. Yvonne is a prime example of the self-actualizer because she is always thriving to learn and achieve new goals. Some of my dreams have come true, she says. I wanted to be in finance, so I found a way to go to business school, and I was a financial analyst. Then there are her many physical accomplishments, like climbing Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro and competing in over 25 triathlons. There is always so much more to learn about myself and so much more to learn about the world, she says. It's like I'm never done. Self-transcendence. Toward the end of his life, Maslow proposed an additional level in the hierarchy, the need for self-transcendence. This need motivates us to go beyond our own needs and feel outward connections through peak experiences of ecstasy and awe. Fulfilling this need might mean devoting oneself to a humanitarian cause or achieving spiritual enlightenment. There is no right or wrong path to self-transcendence, according to Kaufman, 2018. For Yvonne, it means bridging the gap between the able-bodied and disabled communities, bringing people together to pursue common passions such as running and yoga. Infographic 9.1. Introductory text reads, motivational forces drive our behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Psychologists have proposed different theories addressing the needs that create these drives within us. Let's look at the three most prominent theories of motivation. Some theories, like drive reduction theory, best explain motivation related to Some theories, like drive reduction theory, best explain motivation related to physiological needs. Other theories focus on psychological needs, such as the need for an optimal. Other theories focus on psychological needs, such as the need for an optimum level of stimulation, as described in arousal theory. In his hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow combined various drives and proposed that we are motivated to meet some needs before others. Drive reduction theory. Homeostasis motivates us to meet physiological needs. The panel depicts a flow diagram with a woman at center labeled homeostasis drinking water from a bottle. The flow diagram is as follows. Equilibrium leads to balance disturbed by deprivation, like food and water, which leads to need that creates a drive to restore balance, like hunger and thirst, which further leads to drive reduction behaviors, which restore balance by eating and drinking. Eating and drinking lead back to equilibrium. Arousal theory. Humans have an innate need to seek an optimal level of stimulation. The panel depicts a graph with a bell-shaped curve. The horizontal axis is labeled level of arousal, and the vertical axis is labeled level of comfort. The central region below the bell-shaped curve is labeled optimal arousal. The left tail end of the curve is highlighted with a vertical dashed rectangular box, and a vector image of a walking man is over the box with a call-out that reads, "Boredom drives curiosity and activity-seeking behavior." The right tail end of the curve is highlighted with a vertical dashed rectangular box, and the silhouette of a man descending with a parachute is over the box with a call-out that reads, "Feels like anxiety to some, but sensation seekers are comfortable here." Hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow's theory combines physiological and psychological needs in a hierarchy of sequence. A hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow's theory combines physiological and psychological needs in a hierarchy or sequence. We are motivated to meet higher level needs when physiological needs at the base of the hierarchy have been met. A pyramid lists the various physiological and psychological factors. The data from the pyramid from top to bottom is as follows. Self-transcendence. To extend beyond self, a vector image of a woman with 3 outward arrows corresponds to a call-out that reads, "Dedication to a cause, deep spiritual experiences supporting other goals, self-actualization to strive for one's fullest potential." A cursive letter, N, drawn with a paintbrush corresponds to a call-out that reads, "Self-fulfillment, being the best in one's field, expressing one's creativity." Esteem, to achieve, to have self-respect and feelings of independence. An illustration shows a star, and a corresponding call-out reads, "Financial independence, completing education, competence." Love and belongingness, to feel part of the group, to have relationships. An illustration shows a heart, and a corresponding call-out reads, "Family bonds, close friends, sense of community." Safety, to feel safe and secure. A vector image shows a house, and a corresponding call-out reads, "Security, stability, shelter, protection." Physiological, to have a balance of bodily systems. An illustration shows a water droplet, and a corresponding call-out reads, "Food, water, sleep." Exceptions to the rule. Maslow's hierarchy suggests a certain order of needs, but this sequence is not set in stone. Sometimes we work toward meeting multiple needs simultaneously. Other times we abandon lower level needs in favor of higher level needs, according to Henry 2017. For example, we may put off physiological requirements to meet a self-actualization need, going on a hunger strike, or giving up material possessions, for example. The practice of fasting, which occurs in many faiths, including Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Judaism, illustrates how basic physiological needs, food and water, can be placed on hold for a spiritual purpose. Safety is another basic need, often relegated in the pursuit of something more transcendent. Throughout history, soldiers have given their lives fighting for causes like freedom, or throughout history, soldiers have given their lives fighting for causes like freedom and social justice. Breaking fast. Iraqi families gather for iftar, the evening meal eaten. Iraqi families gather for iftar, the evening meal eaten after the daytime fast during Ramadan. As defined in the Quran, fasting is a strict practice of deep personal worship in which Muslims seek the highest level of awareness of the divine. According to Elias, ETL 2016, page 147. Basic needs, food and water, are put on hold for something more transcendent. More needs, self-determination theory. Building on the ideas of Maslow and Erik Erikson, U.S. researchers Edward DECI and Richard Ryan, 2008, proposed the self-determination theory SDT, which suggests that we are born with 3 universal fundamental needs that are always driving us in the direction of optimal functioning: competence, relatedness, and autonomy, according to Stone ETAL 2009. Competence represents the need to reach our goals through mastery of day-to-day responsibilities, passing an exam, for instance. Related is the need to create meaningful and lasting relationships. We are all intrinsically motivated to establish bonds that allow us to share our deepest thoughts and feelings. Autonomy means managing one's behavior to reach personal goals. Meeting with an academic advisor as you move one step closer to choosing a career is an example of autonomy. When autonomy is threatened, for example, when parents are strict and controlling of their adolescent children, frustration may increase, according to Van Peteghem, ETAL 2015. Connections in the Human Development chapter, we introduce Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, which suggests that stages of development are marked by tasks or emotional crises. These crises often touch on issues of competence, relatedness, and autonomy. Achievement and power. In the early 1930s, U.S. psychologist Henry Murray, 1893 through 1988, proposed that humans are motivated by 20 fundamental needs, one of which has been the subject of extensive research: the need for achievement, NACH. The NACH creates a drive to reach attainable and challenging goals, especially in the face of competition. Researchers suggest that people tend to seek situations that provide opportunities for satisfying this need, according to McClelland, ETAL 1976. For example, a child who aspires to become a professional basketball player might practice every day, read books about the sport, and try out for the selective basketball teams. Some people are motivated by a need for power, NPOW, or a drive to control and influence others, according to McClelland, ETAL 1976. People with this need may project their importance through outward appearances, driving around in luxury cars, wearing flashy designer clothing, and buying expensive houses. Those with high levels of NPOW enjoy dominating others, but hate being dominated themselves. In the next section, we return our focus to the base of Maslow's pyramid, where life-sustaining drives are represented. We will explore sexuality, a powerful motivator of human behavior. Show what you know. Question number 1. Blank is a stimulus or force that directs the way we behave, think, and feel. The answer is motivation. Motivation is a stimulus or force that directs the way we behave, think, and feel. Question number 2. When behaviors are driven by internal factors such as interest and personal satisfaction, blank is involved. Is the answer A, extrinsic motivation, B, intrinsic motivation, C, persistence, or D, external consequences? The answer is B, intrinsic motivation. When behaviors are driven by internal factors such as interest and personal satisfaction, intrinsic motivation is involved. Question number 3. According to Maslow, the biological and psychological needs motivating behavior are arranged in a blank. The answer is hierarchy of needs. According to Maslow, the biological and psychological needs motivating behavior are arranged in a hierarchy of needs. Question number 4. How does drive reduction theory of motivation differ from arousal theory? The drive reduction theory of motivation suggests that human behaviors are driven by the need to maintain homeostasis, that is, to fulfill basic biological needs. If a need is not fulfilled, this creates a drive or state of tension that pushes us or motivates behaviors to meet the need. Once a need is met, the drive is reduced, at least temporarily, because this is an ongoing process as the need inevitably returns. Arousal theory suggests that humans seek an optimal level of arousal, and what is optimal is based on individual differences. Behaviors can arise out of the simple desire for stimulation or arousal, which is a level of alertness and engagement in the world, and people are motivated to seek out activities that fulfill this need. Drive reduction theory suggests that the motivation is to reduce tension, but arousal theory suggests that in some cases, the motivation is to increase tension. Sexuality. In the last section, we discussed various theories of motivation, including Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As we explored the various levels of the hierarchy, you may have wondered where sex fits in. Surely humans are motivated to have sex, but why? Sex may be studied as a purely physiological need, according to Maslow, 1943, but ordinarily sexual behavior is multi-determined, page 381. In other words, there are many forces motivating us to engage in sexual activity. These include the need for affection and love, and that means both giving and receiving love, page 381. Every person is different, of course. There is tremendous variability in human sexuality, a dimension of human nature encompassing everything that makes us sexual beings, sexual activities, attitudes, and behaviors. The Birds and the Bees, LO6, describe the human sexual response as identified by Masters and Johnson. To grasp the complexity of sexual experiences, we must understand the basic physiology of the sexual response. Enter William Masters, 1915 through 2001, and Virginia Johnson, 1925 through 2013, and their pioneering laboratory research, which included the study of approximately 10,000 distinct sexual responses of 312 male and 382 female participants. According to Masters and Johnson, 1966. Before delving into the research of Masters and Johnson, it is important to recognize the limitations of their approach by focusing on heterosexual males and females. Masters and Johnson failed to capture the full spectrum of gender identities and sexual orientations, according to Curley and Johnson, 2022, and Wiley, 2022. These researchers were particularly interested in determining the physiological changes that occurred during sexual activities such as masturbation and intercourse, using a variety of instruments to measure blood flow, body temperature, muscular changes, and heart rate. They discovered that most people experience a similar physiological sexual response, which can result from oral stimulation, manual stimulation, vaginal intercourse, or masturbation. People of all genders tend to follow a similar cycle: excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. Figure 9.1. These phases vary in duration for different people. Sexy science. In the mid-1950s, U.S. researchers William Masters and Virginia Johnson teamed up to study the bodily changes that occur during masturbation and sex. Their studies were groundbreaking and upended many long-held misconceptions about sex. For example, Masters and Johnson found that penis length does not determine a person's ability to give pleasure, according to Fox, 2013. Sexual arousal begins during the excitement phase, when physical changes start to become evident. Muscles tense, the heartbeat quickens, breathing accelerates, blood pressure rises, and the nipples become firm. The penis becomes erect, the scrotum constricts, and the testes pull up toward the body. The vagina lubricates, and the clitoris swells. Next is the plateau phase leading up to the orgasm. During this time, the muscles continue to tense, breathing and heart rate increase, and blood pressure arises. During this time, the muscles continue to tense, breathing and heart rate increase, and blood pressure rises. This phase is usually quite short-lived, lasting only a few seconds to minutes. The shortest phase of the sexual response cycle is the orgasm phase. As the peak of sexual response is reached, an orgasm occurs, which is a powerful combination of extremely gratifying sensations and a series of rhythmic muscular contractions. When people are asked to describe their orgasmic experiences, it is very difficult to discern sex differences. Some studies using PET scans suggest that the brain activity of males and females is very similar during an orgasm. According to Georgiadis, ETAL 2009, and Ma and Binnick 2001. Other research indicates that certain patterns of brain activation may differ, according to Wise ETAL 2017. The final phase of the sexual response cycle, according to Masters and Johnson, is the resolution phase. This is when bodies return to a relaxed state. Without further sexual arousal, the blood flows out of the genitals and blood pressure, heart rate, and breathing return to normal. Males lose their erections, the testes move down, and the skin of the scrotum loosens. They also experience a refractory period, an interval during which they cannot attain another orgasm. This can last from minutes to hours. For females, the resolution phase is characterized by a decrease in clitoral swelling. Females do not experience a refractory period, and if sexual stimulation continues, some are capable of having multiple orgasms. Figure 9.1, Masters and Johnson's Human Sexual Response Cycle. In the male sexual response, on the left, excitement is typically followed by a brief plateau orgasm and then a refractory period during which another orgasm is not possible. In the female sexual response on the right, there is no refractory period. Orgasm is typically followed by resolution A, or if sexual stimulation continues, additional orgasms B. The labels on the vertical axis read excitement, plateau, and orgasm. The labels on the vertical axis read excitement, plateau, and orgasm. Graph 1, male, a curve starts at excitement, gradually rises to the plateau where it flattens to run horizontally for a period of time. The curve then sharply increases to a reach at peak at orgasm. After this peak, the curve quickly falls back toward the excitement state. This increasing section from plateau to orgasm is labeled refractory period, and the descending part is labeled resolution. Graph 2, female. Two curves are plotted on the graph labeled A and B. Curve A starts from excitement, increases steeply toward orgasm, with small peaks and troughs along excitement. The curve then remains at orgasm for a short period of time before descending steeply. The descending part is labeled resolution. Curve B also originates from excitement, ascends to plateau smoothly, and remains for a period of time. The curve then sharply increases and decreases with two small peaks toward orgasm. After the second orgasm, the curve descends gradually toward excitement state again. The descending part is labeled resolution. Now that we have explored the physiology of sex, let's move on to its underlying psychology. How are sexual activities shaped by learning, relationships, and the need to be loved and belong? Sexual orientation, it's a continuum. L07 defines sexual orientation and summarizes how it develops. Sexual orientation is the attraction one feels both physically and emotionally to other people, according to APA 2023, June 6th. Some describe it as a continuum that includes many dimensions of our sexuality, including attraction, desire, emotions, and all the behaviors that result. Human beings can be attracted to men, women, both neither, or to people who are gender queer, androgynous, or have other gender identities, according to APA 2015C, page 22, figure 9.2. People attracted to a gender different from their own are commonly referred to as heterosexual. Those attracted to members of the same gender are often referred to as gay or lesbian, and those attracted to more than one gender are called bisexual. There are also those who identify as pansexual. They feel romantically attracted to others, irrespective of gender, according to GLAAD-NDB. But sexual orientation does not necessarily fit into these neat categories. If sexual orientation is more like height than eye color, why should we try to force it into a small number of categories, according to Epstein, ETAL 2012, page 1377. Figure 9.2, the sexual orientation continuum. We can think of sexual orientation as a continuum rather than a set of discrete categories. This graph shows the range of orientations that might categorize a population, according to Epstein 2016, information from Epstein 2016. The horizontal axis has evenly spaced markings labeled from left to right as exclusively same-sex, mainly same-sex, main opposite sex, and exclusively opposite sex. The vertical axis is labeled population and ranges from 0 to 100% in increments of 20%. A rightward arrow along the horizontal axis labeled societal pressure extends from exclusively same-sex to exclusively opposite sex. A concave, up increasing curve passes through the following points: exclusively same-sex 10, mainly same-sex 10, mainly opposite sex 15, exclusively opposite sex 90. All data are approximate. Those who do not feel sexually attracted to others are referred to as asexual. A lack of interest in sex does not necessarily prevent a person from maintaining relationships with spouses, partners, or friends. We can't be sure how many people consider themselves asexual, but estimates range from 0.6 to 5.5% of the population, according to Crooks and Bauer, 2021. There is a universal of labels for different sexual orientations. In the United States, commonly used adjectives for people attracted to same-sex partners include lesbian, women attracted to women, and gay, anyone attracted to those of the same gender, according to APA 2022, May 23rd. Some people refer to themselves as queer, thereby avoiding the gender binaries of male and female, or the perceived restrictions imposed by lesbian, gay, and bisexual sexual orientations, according to APA 2015C, page 22. In other words, they choose not to be boxed into a certain category. There are many more labels for sexual orientation, some of which are mentioned in Table 9.1. Table 9.1, terms to describe sexual orientation. Terms defined: asexual, not feeling sexually attracted to any person, according to Crooks and Bauer 2021. Bisexual describes one who is attracted to more than one gender, according to APA 2017, November. Gay, being attracted to others of the same gender. Lesbian refers to a woman who is attracted to other women. LGBTQ+, inclusive ways to represent lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, ally, and other identities, according to Cherry 2020. Pansexual, being able to feel attracted to people of all different genders, according to Human Rights Campaign 2023. Questioning describes someone who is exploring their sexuality and or gender identity, according to Human Rights Campaign 2023. Above is terminology commonly used to identify different sexual orientations and, in the case of LGBTQ+, gender identities as well. Before using these terms to describe people, find out their pronouns and how they identify. Another important term associated with sexual orientation is ally, a person who supports and advocates for those in the LGBTQ+ community, according to Gardner and Ellenis, 2020. How does sexual orientation develop? We are not sure how sexual orientation develops, but scientists agree that it is not a matter of choice, and people do not have control over whom they find attractive. Research suggests sexual orientation results from an interaction of many biological and environmental factors, nature and nurture, according to Epstein, 2016, and XUETAL, 2019. Genes may play a role. According to a study of nearly 500,000 people, many different genes, perhaps hundreds or thousands, play a role in determining our orientation, according to Ghana, ETAL 2019, and Kaiser 2019. But DNA is only part of the story. As twin studies have shown, environmental factors also contribute to the development of sexual orientation. In a large study of Swedish twins, researchers explored the impact of genes and environment on same-sex sexual behavior among 2,320 identical twin pairs and 1,506 fraternal twin pairs. In their sample, the identical twins were moderately more likely than the fraternal twins to have the same sexual orientation. They also found the same-sex sexual behavior for identical twins had heritability estimates of around 34 to 39% for males and 18 to 19% for females, according to Langstrom ETAL 2010 and Rinaldi 2022. Others report heritability estimates ranging from 25% to 50% for males and sustainably. Others report heritability estimates ranging from 25% to 50% for males and substantially lower percentages for females, according to Epstein 2016. Overall, same-sex behaviors are more common among those who have close relatives who are gay or lesbian, suggesting there is a genetic component for sexual orientation. Close relatives share many common genes, according to Bregazzi, ETAL 2023. These findings highlight two important factors. Males and females differ in terms of the heritability of same-sex sexual behavior, and both genes and environment, nature and nurture, contribute to sexual orientation.
Connections. In Chapter 1, we introduced twin studies, which are commonly used to examine the degree to which nature and nurture contribute to psychological traits. Because identical monozygotic twins share 100% of their genetic makeup at conception, they share more genetically influenced characteristics than fraternal dizygotic twins, who share about 50% of their genes. Since sexual orientation is influenced by genes, we would expect identical twins to be more similar in their orientations than fraternal twins. Looking beyond genes, the development of sexual orientation may begin before birth. The fetal gonads secrete hormones, estrogens and androgens, that influence reproductive anatomy. The presence of androgens, secreted primarily by the male gonads, may steer the development of sexual orientation toward females. This could potentially lead to heterosexual orientation in males, but same-sex attraction in females, according to Breedlove 2017. To explore this possibility, researchers have studied pregnant people with elevated hormone levels, the result of a genetic variation or medication. Evidence from these cases suggests that early in utero exposure to high levels of androgens may be associated with male-type development
and same-sex attraction in females, according to Berenbaum et al. 2011 and Jordan Young 2012. Interestingly, having older brothers in the family seems to be associated with a higher probability of same-sex attraction in males. A cross-cultural phenomenon known as the fraternal birth order effect, according to Blanchard 2008, Blanchard et al. 2020, and Neela et al. 2019. One study found that males with one older brother were 38% more likely than those with no older brothers to be gay. Blanchard et al. 2020. Why would this be? According to the maternal immunity hypothesis, cells from a male fetus are introduced into the mother's circulatory system, triggering an immune response. The mother's immune system produces antibodies that influence the development of the next male fetus she carries, resulting in a variety of changes in neurons that direct the person to later be attracted to male. The mother's immune system produces antibodies that influence the development of the next male fetus she carries, resulting in a variety of changes in neurons that direct the person to later be attracted to men rather than to women. According to Blanchard et al. 2020, page 2. However, some researchers have had difficulty replicating the early maternal immunity hypothesis studies. According to Curran et al. 2015, Kashida and Rahman 2015, XU and Zhang 2017. Some scholars question efforts to uncover biological causes of same-sex attraction, according to Jacobs 2012. Could this line of inquiry lead to discriminatory practices like editing gay genes out of embryos? Given the biological complexity of sexual orientation, this scenario is highly unlikely, and as researchers point out, bigotry needs no data. We should use our scientific knowledge ethically and thoughtfully to arrive at a fuller understanding of who we are. According to Phelps and Widow 2019, paragraph 16. Does culture play a role? We have spent a great deal of time discussing the potential role of biological factors in sexual orientation. How does culture fit into the picture? Earlier, we noted that sexual orientation might be understood as a continuum. According to Epstein et al. 2023, at one end of the continuum are people who are strictly heterosexual, and at the other end are those who are undeniably gay or lesbian. Many people fall somewhere in the middle of these two extremes, according to Epstein 2016. A small percentage of individuals change their orientation between adolescence and young adulthood. This is more common in females, which suggests that psychosocial factors may be involved, according to XU et al. 2021. Because we live in a homomosic society, one that strongly favors heterosexuality, most people in the middle of the continuum will be pushed toward a heterosexual orientation. Those at either end are less likely to be flexible in their orientation, in part due to the strong genetic component of sexual orientation, according to Epstein 2016. Be Proud, in an interview with Rolling Stone, singer-songwriter Janelle Monáe said that she identified with pansexuality, or being attracted to people irrespective of gender. I want young girls, young boys, non-binary, gay, straight, queer, sexual. I want young girls, young boys, non-binary, gay, straight, queer people who are having a hard time dealing with their sexuality, dealing with feeling ostracized or bullied for just being their unique selves, to know that I see you. Be proud, according to Spanos 2018, paragraph 10. A history of unfair treatment. Although differences in sexual orientation and gender Although differences in sexual orientation and gender identity are universal and have been evident throughout recorded history, individuals who identify as LGBTQ+ have been subjected to stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. LGBTQ+ people in the United States, for example, have been and continue to be subjected to harassment, violence, and unfair practices related to housing and employment. Many states are working to rectify these issues, but others have passed laws that overtly target or discriminate against LGBTQ people. On state and local levels, there have been many attempts to silence LGBTQ people and communities, particularly as they relate to public school education and young people's health care. According to Nadal 2023, page 18. In 2020, the federal government took a big step toward protecting the rights of LGBTQ+ people. In June of that year, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the 1964 Civil Rights Act shields gay and transgender employees from discrimination, according to Barnes 2020, paragraph 2. Normal is relative. It is only natural for us to wonder if what we are doing between the sheets for elsewhere. It is only natural for us to wonder if what we are doing between the sheets or elsewhere is normal or healthy. Is it normal to masturbate? Is it normal to fantasize about sex with strangers? The answers to these types of questions depend somewhat on cultural context. Most of us unknowingly learn sexual scripts or cultural rules that tell us what type of activities are appropriate and don't interfere with healthy sexual intimacy. In some cultures, the sexual script suggests that women should have minimal, if any, sexual experience before marriage, but men are expected to explore their sexuality or sow their wild oats. Gathering sex data. Alfred Kinsey, 1894 through 1956, and colleagues were among the first to try to scientifically and objectively examine the sexual behavior of people in the United States according to Kinsey, ETAL 1948, and Kinsey, ETAL 1953. Using the survey method, Kinsey and his team collected data on the sexual behaviors of 5,300 white females and 5,940 white females. Using the survey method, Kinsey and his team collected data of the sexual behaviors of 5,300 white males and 5,940 white females. They found that both males and females masturbated and had experiences with premarital sex. They found that both males and females masturbated and had experiences with premarital sex, extramarital sex, and sexual activity with someone of the same sex. Radical research. Alfred Kinsey interviews a subject in his office at the Institute for Sex Research, now the Kinsey Institute. Kinsey began investigating human sexuality in the 1930s, when talking about sex was taboo. He started gathering data with surveys, but then switched to personal interviews, which he believed to be more effective. These interviews often went on for hours and included hundreds of questions, according to PBS 2005. The Kinsey study was groundbreaking in terms of its data content and methodology, which included accuracy checks and assurances of confidentiality. The data continue to serve as a valuable reference for researchers studying how sexual behaviors and attitudes have evolved over time. However, Kinsey's work was not without limitations. For example, Kinsey and colleagues 1948 and 1953 failed to obtain a representative sample of the population. The sample lacked ethnic diversity, and there was an overrepresentation of well-educated Protestants, according to Potter 2006 and Wallen 1949. Despite these drawbacks, the work of Kinsey and other psychologists, such as Evelyn Hooker 1907 through 1996, was critical in changing views about same-sex sexual behavior, according to Stanley et al. 2017. Their research repositioned homosexuality outside the kingdom of mental illness, according to Schneidman 1998, page 481. Here we have an example showing how psychologists can drive social change, according to Stanley et al. 2017. Connections. In Chapter 1, we emphasized that representative samples enable us to generalize findings to populations. In this context, we cannot draw inferences about the sexual behaviors of all people because study participants came from a narrow subset of the population. Subsequent research has been better designed using samples that are more representative of the population, according to Herbenick et al. 2022 and Michael et al. 1994. As recently as 2002, the average adult American had sex approximately 64 times a year, but by 2014 that declined to about 53 times a year. According to Twenge et al. 2017, page 2391, as people get older, both masturbation and partnered sex become somewhat less frequent. Males may direct some of their energy away from mating effort and toward nurturing children and grandchildren, according to Gray et al. 2020. Single older people express less interest in hookups, multiple partners, and other sexual adventures. Interestingly, older single females tend to be more satisfied with their sex lives than younger single females, according to Gray et al. 2019. How do males and females differ? As stereotypes suggest, males think about sex more often than females, according to Lawman et al. 1994. And they consistently report a higher frequency of masturbation, according to Peplau 2003. Decades ago in the United States, males tended to be more tolerant than females about casual sex before marriage and more permissive in their attitudes about extramarital sex, according to Lawman et al. 2000. According to Lawman et al. 1994. But these differences are not apparent in heterosexual teenagers and young adults, who more commonly engage in hookups, which were once called one-night stands, according to DeJashis and Tehran 2021. Hookups, which can be anything from kissing to sexual intercourse, reveal major shifts in the way people view sexual activity. Problems with sex. Sexual dysfunction occurs when there is a significant disturbance in the ability to respond sexually or to gain pleasure from sex. American Psychiatric Association 2022 survey data suggests that 43% of women and 31% of men experience some sort of sexual dysfunction, according to Lawman et al. 1999. Temporary difficulties can result from everyday stressors or situational factors, while longer-term problems stem from a variety of issues, including health conditions, beliefs about sex, ignorance about sexual practices, and performance expectations. Let's explore the major categories of sexual dysfunction, keeping in mind that they sometimes overlap. Desire, illness, fatigue, relationship frustration, and other situational factors can lead to temporary problems with desire. In some cases, lack of desire is persistent and distressing. This is the most common sexual issue reported by females, but males may be affected too. Broto 2010 and Derogatis et al. 2020. Arousal. Problems with arousal occur when the psychological desire to engage in sexual behavior is present, but the body does not cooperate. Males with erectile disorder may have trouble getting or maintaining an erection or experience a decrease in rigidity. American Psychiatric Association 2022. Up to 20% of males report they have occasionally experienced problems with erections. According to Hawk 2016, females can also struggle with arousal. Female sexual interest and arousal disorder is apparent in reduced interest in sex, lack of initiation of sexual activities, reduced excitement, or decreased genital sensations during sex. According to American Psychiatric Association 2022, orgasm. Disorders related to orgasm are yet another category of dysfunction. Female orgasmic disorder is diagnosed when a female is consistently unable to reach orgasm, has reduced orgasmic intensity, or does not reach orgasmic. Female orgasmic disorder is diagnosed when a female is consistently unable to reach orgasm, has reduced orgasmic intensity, or does not reach orgasm quickly enough during sexual activity, according to American Psychiatric Association 2022. Males who experience frequent delay or inability to ejaculate might have a condition known as delayed ejaculation, American Psychiatric Association 2022. With this disorder, the ability to achieve orgasm and ejaculate is inhibited or delayed during partnered sexual activity. Preliminary data suggest delayed ejaculation may be more common in males who habitually masturbate to pornography, according to Fogg, Polson, ECAL 2020. Males who have trouble controlling when they ejaculate, particularly during vaginal sex, may be experiencing premature early ejaculation, according to American Psychiatric Association 2022. Pain, the final category of sexual dysfunction. Painful intercourse typically affects females. Genitopelvic pain and penetration disorder refers to 4 types of co-occurring symptoms specific to females: difficulty having intercourse, pain in the genitals or pelvis, fear of pain or vaginal penetration, and tension of the pelvic floor muscles, according to American Psychiatric Association 2022. Up to 15% of females in North America report frequent pain during intercourse, and issues related to pain are associated with reduced desire and arousal. Sexually transmitted infections. A growing number of people in the United States carry sexually transmitted infections, STIs, diseases or illnesses passed on through sexual activity. Williamson and Chen, 2020. Table 9.2. STIs have many causes, but most are bacterial or viral. Bacterial infections such as syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia sometimes clear up with antibiotics, but many bacterial strains have become resistant to mainstay antibiotics, according to Williamson and Chen, 2020. Viral infections like genital herpes, human papillomavirus, HPV, and human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, have no cure, only treatments to reduce symptoms, according to World Health Organization, WHO, 2023, July 10th. That being said, there are preventative measures one can take apart from using condoms or other latex barriers to avoid contracting some viruses. For example, there is a vaccine for HPV, the virus that can cause warts and various forms of cancer in the genitals and throat. The CDC recommends this vaccine for children ages 11 through 12, according to CDC 2021, November 16th. There is also a medication called PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, that lowers the likelihood of acquiring HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, through sex or drug use, according to CDC 2022, June 3rd. Table 9.2, sexually transmitted infections, STIs. STIs, symptoms, prevalence in the United States. Chlamydia, females often have no symptoms. Females often have no symptoms. Males can experience discharge from penis, burning when urinating, and pain and swelling of the testicles. Prevalence in the United States, 2.4 million. Gonorrhea, no symptoms, may be present in males or females. Males can experience burning when urinating and white, yellow, or green discharge. Females can experience pain and burning when urinating and vaginal discharge. Prevalence in the United States, 209,000. Syphilis, firm, round sores that appear where the infection enters the body and can then spread to other parts of the body. Prevalence in the United States, 156,000. Herpes HSV2, blisters on the genitals, rectum, or mouth, painful sores after blisters break, fever, body aches, and swollen glands can occur. Prevalence in the United States, 18.6 million.
human papillomavirus, HPV, genital warts, cancer in the cervix, vagina, penis, anus, and throat. Prevalence in the United States, 42.5 million. Human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. In the weeks after infection, some people develop flu-like symptoms. If left untreated, HIV can eventually cause severe damage to the immune system. This stage of the disease, called acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, is fatal without treatment. Prevalence in the United States, 1.2 million. About 1 in 5 people in the United States has a sexually transmitted infection, STI. Nearly half of all new cases are among people ages 15 through 24, according to CRISIL ETAL 2021. Information from CDC 2022, April 12th to Information from CDC 2022, April 12th, June 30th, and CRISIL ETAL 2021, HIV.gov 2023. In the next section, we return our focus to the base of Maslow's pyramid, where life-sustaining drives are represented. We will explore hunger, one of the most powerful motivators of human behavior. Show what you know. Question number 1. Masters and Johnson studied physiological changes that accompany sexual activity. Males and females experience a similar sexual response cycle, including the following ordered phases. Is the answer A, excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution? B, plateau, excitement, orgasm, and relaxation? C, excitement, plateau, and orgasm? Or D, excitement, orgasm, and resolution? The answer is A, excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. Question number 2. Having older brothers seem to be associated with sex attraction in males, a phenomenon known as the blank. The answer is fraternal birth order effect. Having older brothers seem to be associated with the same-sex attraction in males, a phenomenon known as the fraternal birth order effect. Hunger. I know hunger. Ibrahim has had enough excitement, fear, and discomfort for a lifetime. While serving with the U.S. Marines, he was deployed on 3 combat missions, 2 in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. Those tours gave him a front row seat to the horrors of war. He has seen bodies of the dead, slept on floors littered with cow feces, and heard the screams of a friend who lost both legs to an improvised explosive device, IED. He also knows how it feels to be hungry, truly hungry. During his missions, there were times when food shipments never made it to his unit. I remember one time we were supposed to get a resupply. The airplane that was going to drop it in got shot at, so they aborted the mission, Ibrahim says. We just stayed hungry for almost a whole week. As you might imagine, everyone became irritable, and sleep was virtually impossible. It felt like my stomach was in a knot. It was just empty, Ibrahim recalls. If you're lucky enough to go to sleep, I guarantee you are going to be dreaming about food. There was no reprieve from the hunger. It was constant. Serving his country, Ibrahim's motivation for joining the military came partly from his parents, who raised him with a strong sense of social responsibility. You don't take anything for free, Ibrahim says, for a country that has been so generous to my family and I. For me to just live here and not contribute or give back in any way was unacceptable, according to Shams 2016, 35 seconds. Hungry brain, hungry body. Have you ever felt a knot in your stomach, as Ibrahim describes? Perhaps you have noticed your stomach contracting and growling when you haven't eaten for a while. What causes these rumblings, and are they a sign of hunger or something else? LO8, discuss how the stomach and the hypothalamus makes us feel hunger. The stomach and blood sugar. In a classic study, Walter Cannon and A.L. Washburn, 1912, sought to answer this question. Figure 9.3. Here's a brief synopsis of their experiment. Washburn swallowed an inflatable balloon that could be used to record his stomach contractions. Whenever Washburn felt hunger pangs, he pushed a button using this procedure.
The researchers found that stomach contractions and hunger pangs occurred at the same time. Figure 9.3, Cannon and Washburn's classic study. Washburn swallowed a special balloon attached to a device for monitoring stomach contractions. While the balloon was in place, he pressed a key every time he felt hungry. Comparing the record of key presses against the balloon measurements, Washburn showed that stomach contractions accompany feelings of hunger. The man is standing in front of a table. The stomach and an inflated balloon within the stomach of the man are labeled. A hose connects the man's mouth to a U-shaped tube, which is attached to a recording device through a pen. The right hand of the man is on a switch labeled response key, which is connected to a second pin. A timer is also connected to a third pin. The recording device is cylindrical and wrapped with a grid paper on which the pins draw signals as the cylinder spins. The measurements correspond to stomach contractions through the balloon time and hunger feelings through the switch that is pressed by the subject. A nearly triangular wave on the top of the paper is labeled stomach contractions. The linear line at the center of the paper is labeled time, and a square wave at the bottom of the paper is labeled hunger feelings. The increases in hunger feelings correspond to the peaks of stomach contractions. The hunger feelings drop corresponding to the trough of the stomach contractions. Cannon and Washburn's experiment demonstrates that the stomach plays an important role in hunger, but evidence suggests this is just one piece of the puzzle. For example, cancer patients who have had their stomachs surgically removed consume normal amounts of food and experience typical levels of satiety, that is, the feeling of being full. Berg, ETAL 2003, Kara Nicholas, ETAL 2013. We also must consider chemicals in the blood, such as glucose or blood sugar. When glucose levels dip, the stomach and liver send signals to the brain that something must be done about this reduced energy situation. The brain, in turn, initiates a sense of hunger. The hypothalamus and hunger. A key player in hunger regulation is the hypothalamus, which can be divided into functionally distinct areas. A key player in hunger regulation is the hypothalamus, which can be divided into functionally distinct areas. When the lateral hypothalamus is activated, appetite increases. Even well-fed animals will experience a surge in appetite when researchers electrically stimulate this area of the brain. Destroy the lateral hypothalamus and animals lose interest in food, even to the point of starvation. Because the lateral hypothalamus plays a role in motivating eating behavior, it helps preserve the balance between energy supply and demand, according to Leininger, 2011, and Estimaticus, ETAL 2016. If the ventromedial hypothalamus becomes activated, appetite declines, causing an animal to stop eating. Disable this region of the brain, and the animal will overeat to the point of obesity. The ventromedial hypothalamus receives information about levels of blood glucose and other feeding-related stimuli, as it, too, works to maintain the body's energy balance. According to Gerard, ETAL 2015, and King 2006. The hypothalamus has a variety of sensors that react to information about hunger and food intake. This information is communicated via hormones in the bloodstream, figure 9.4. One such hormone is leptin, which is secreted by fat cells and plays a role in suppressing hunger. Another is insulin, a pancreatic hormone involved in controlling levels of glucose in the bloodstream. With input from these and other hormones, the brain can monitor energy levels and respond accordingly. This complex system enables us to know when we are hungry, full, or somewhere in between. Connections in the biology and behavior chapter, we describe hormones as chemical messengers released into the bloodstream. Hormones do not act as quickly as neurotransmitters, but their messages are more widely spread throughout the body. Here we learn new hormones are involved in communicating information about hunger. Figure 9.4, Hunger Regulation. Feelings of hunger and satisfaction result from a complex communication system linking the brain and body. Hormones from the digestive organs communicate information about satiety and hunger to the hypothalamus, a part of the brain that plays an important role in maintaining homeostasis or balance in the body's systems. Separate areas of the hypothalamus then send signals to other parts of the brain, motivating us to increase or decrease eating. A schematic shows a woman biting an apple. Her brain and the A schematic shows a woman biting an apple. Her brain and the digestive system are highlighted and labeled. A J-shaped sac is labeled stomach. The upper right portion of the abdominal cavity on the top of the stomach is labeled liver. A flat pear-shaped structure surrounded by the stomach and the abdomen is labeled pancreas. A small cone-shaped structure projecting downward from the brain to the pituitary gland is labeled hypothalamus, and a tissue between the muscles beneath the skin of the abdomen cavity is labeled fat cells. The signals related to the hunger regulation are the satiety signal and hunger signal. Satiety signals, a signal from the intestine is labeled cholecystokinin CCK. Accompanying text reads, hormone released from the gastrointestinal tract that aids digestion. The signal from the fat cells is labeled leptin. Accompanying text reads, a protein hormone released by fat cells to communicate information about the body's fat stores. Hunger signals, a signal from the hypothalamus is labeled orexins. Accompanying text reads, hormones produced in the lateral hypothalamus stimulate increased eating. A signal from the stomach is labeled ghrelin. Accompanying text reads, hormone released by empty stomach levels rise when we are hungry. A signal from the pancreas is labeled insulin. Accompanying text reads, hormone produced by pancreas in response to food intake controls levels of glucose in the bloodstream. A drop in glucose is a primary hunger signal for the body. An illustration beside the schematic shows an enlarged view of the coronal section. An illustration beside the schematic shows an enlarged view of the coronal section of brain. Two small ovoid structures on either side of the brain near the brain stem are labeled ventromedial hypothalamus, and accompanying text reads, works to decrease appetite. Two large, nearly elliptical structures beside the ovoid structure on either side of the brain are labeled lateral hypothalamus, and accompanying text reads, works to increase appetite. A call-out from the coronal section reads, different divisions of the hypothalamus perform distinct functions in relation to regulating hunger. Let's have a meal, cultural and social context. Biology is not the only factor influencing eating habits. We must also consider the social and cultural context. In the United States, social activities, holidays, and work events often revolve around food. We frequently eat on the go, rushing to our next class or meeting, and don't take the time to experience the taste of food. We also tend to match our food intake to those around us, although we may not be aware of their influence. According to Herman ECAL 2003 and Vartanian ETAL 2015. Gender plays a role in eating habits too. Using naturalistic observation, researchers found that women choose lower calorie meals or eat less when trying to impress others, according to Vartanian 2015 and Young ETAL 2009. Connections. In Chapter 1, we discussed naturalistic observation, the study of participants in their natural environments. When conducting this type of descriptive research, one must avoid disturbing participants or their environment. Here we assume the researchers measured and recorded meals without interfering with participants' behavior. Portion distortion. Eating decisions. Eating decisions are driven by a variety of factors including social influence, hunger, and satiety, according to Vartanian ETAL 2016. But more subtle variables, such as portion size, also come into play. Serving sizes have increased over the last several decades. Think supersized meals, and this may lead to greater consumption. Steenhuis and Poelman 2017. For example, a meta-analysis found that people eat an average of 35% more when their food. For example, a meta-analysis found that people eat an average of 35% more when their food portions are doubled, according to Zletevska ETAL 2014. Being exposed to images of large food portions tends to recalibrate perceptions of what is a normal serving of that food, according to Robinson ETAL 2016, page 32. Remember this the next time you order takeout. Obesity. Around the world, a growing number of people experience obesity. Approximately 42% of adults in the United States are considered obese, meaning they have a body mass index BMI that exceeds 30, according to Hales ETAL 2020. 1 in 5 U.S. children is obese, and if we narrow our focus to older children ages 16 through 19, the prevalence of obesity is 42%. Skinner ETAL 2018. Although BMI is easy to calculate and somewhat useful for studying population-wide health trends, it can be problematic. For example, the BMI calculation doesn't distinguish between the contributions of muscle and fat, and the standard BMI cutoff points for overweight and obesity may not be appropriate for everyone, according to Rayo ETAL 2015. Is processed food to blame? Children in the United States get 67% of their calories from ultra-processed foods like chicken nuggets, cookies, sports drinks, and other ready-to-eat or ready-to-heat industrial formulations, according to Wang ETAL 2021, page 250. According to Wang ETAL 2021, page 520, researchers suspect processed foods are contributing to the obesity epidemic, and not just because they are high in calories. The chemicals they contain appear to interact with the gut-brain signaling pathway, which could promote overeating and metabolic dysfunction, according to Small and DiFelencio 2019, page 347. How much can you control? Surprisingly, there is relatively little fluctuation in adult weight over time. According to one theory, we all tend to maintain a stable weight or set point despite variability in day-to-day exercise and food intake. If you cut back on calories and your weight falls below this set point, metabolism decreases, causing you to gain weight and return to your set point, according to DeShazo ETAL 2015. Exceed the set point and metabolism increases, once again moving you back toward your stable weight, according to DeShazo ETAL 2015, and Kesey and Herfonen 1997. The set point acts like a thermostat, helping maintain a consistent weight despite changing conditions. Some critics of the set point model suggests that it fails to appreciate the importance of social and environmental influences, according to Strobe ETAL 2013. These theorists suggest we should consider a settling point which is less rigid and might explain how the set point
can actually change based on the relative amounts of food consumed and energy used. A settling point may also help us understand how body weight can shift to a newly maintained weight, and why so many people are overweight as a result of environmental factors such as bigger meal portions, calorie-dense foods, and eating during other activities like watching television. This brings us to an important point. If you always have dinner while watching TV or snack before going to sleep, these activities become associated with hunger. This creation of associations or conditioning is also important. This creation of associations or conditioning is also an important part of emotional eating, or eating because you feel depressed or upset. According to Bonger's ETAL 2015, whatever your settling point may be, it is partly a result of your genetic makeup. Studies suggest that the heritability of BMI is around 65%, according to Speakman ETAL 2011. Researchers following participants for 25 years reported an even higher heritability, 84%, and at least one study of monozygotic twins found heritability of fat mass to be as high as 90%, according to Albuquerque ETAL 2015. These findings are striking, but they should be taken with a grain of salt because heritability may vary depending on the population being studied. For example, one group of researchers found that the heritability of BMI for children in lower risk homes where people tend to engage in healthy behaviors like physical exercise was 39% compared to 86% for children from higher risk homes, according to Schrempf ETAL 2018. We may be genetically predisposed to stay within a certain weight range, but that doesn't mean our BMI is written into our genes. Lifestyle choices and environmental factors play an important role too. How many servings? A single serving of this snack mix contains 130 calories, but did you check how many servings are in the bag? If you eat the whole bag, a total of 8 servings, you are consuming 1,040 calories. That's about half of the daily calories needed by a moderately active young woman and more than a third required by a moderately active young man. According to the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, ND, overeating, sleep, and screen time. Have you ever noticed how sleep deprivation affects your eating habits? Preliminary research suggests that inadequate sleep is linked to obesity. The precise relationship between insufficient sleep and obesity is not fully understood, but research indicates that sleep loss can disrupt appetite-controlling hormones. 2 nights of insufficient sleep triggers changes in blood concentrations of ghrelin and leptin, which leads to increased food intake, according to Broussard and Klein 2022. Screen time is another risk factor for weight problems, particularly among children. Spending more time looking at screens, especially before bed, has been associated with higher rates of obesity, according to Buchanan ETAL 2016 and Minishita ETAL 2021. The secret to slimming down. To lose weight, a good strategy is to eat less and move more. Table 9.3. In other words, use more calories than you are taking in. Our ancestors didn't have to worry about this. Needing energy to sustain themselves, they had no choice but to choose foods rich in calories, an efficient means of survival for them, but not ideal for those of us living in a world of deep dish pizzas, curly fries, and supersized sodas. When experiencing a famine, a decrease in the body's habitual caloric intake, our metabolism naturally slows down. We require fewer calories and have a harder time losing weight. Table 9.3, weight loss, making it fit. The strategies, description. Set realistic goals. Description. Set goals and expectations that are specific, realistic, and flexible. For example, a reasonable goal would be to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Get regular exercise. Walking at a fast pace for 30 minutes every day or almost every day can help with weight loss. Add a variety of physical activities to your daily routines. Eat regularly and track intake. Avoid mindless eating. Focus your attention
on what you are consuming. Eat only when hungry, and write down what and how much you consume in a food diary. Avoid nighttime eating. Keep your metabolism going strong by eating every 3 to 4 hours throughout the day rather than cramming in calories close to bedtime. Drink water. Eliminate sweetened beverages like soda. Plan out your meals. Go shopping for ingredients ahead of time and cook your own healthy meals. That way you don't have to order unhealthy takeout food at the last minute. Losing weight is not an easy task, but it doesn't have to be painful. Making basic lifestyle changes can have significant benefits. Information from Mayo Clinic staff 2019 and Yale University ND. We have now explored many facets of motivation, from basic drives like hunger to more abstract needs for achievement and power. As you may have guessed from the title of this chapter, motivation is intimately tied to emotion. Time to explore the complex world of human emotion. Show what you know. Question number 1. Washburn swallowed a balloon to record his stomach contractions. He also pressed a button to record feelings of hunger. The findings indicated that whenever he felt hunger pangs, his stomach was contracting, stomach was still, blood sugar went up, ventral medial hypothalamus was active. The answer is A, stomach was contracting. Washburn swallowed a balloon to record his stomach contractions. He also pressed a button to record feelings of hunger. The findings indicated that whenever he felt hunger pangs, his stomach was contracting. Question number 2. Describe how the hypothalamus initiates hunger and influences eating behaviors. When glucose levels dip, the stomach and liver send signals to the brain that something must be done about this reduced energy source. The brain in turn initiates a sense of hunger when the lateral hypothalamus is activated. Appetite increases. On the other hand, if the ventromedial hypothalamus becomes activated, appetite declines, causing an animal to stop eating. Emotion. For his family, at a very young age, Ibrahim knew he wanted to join the military. Like many people who enter the armed forces, he was motivated by a desire to serve his country. But after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, he had another reason to enlist. Prejudice toward Muslims, or Islamophobia, reached record levels in the months following 9/11. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, there were 481 anti-Muslim hate crimes reported in 2001, a 1,600% increase from the previous year. FBI Uniform Crime Reports ND and Serrano 2002. Aware of this changing cultural climate, Ibrahim enlisted to protect his family from those who might perceive them as un-American. I went into the military so people could not accuse my parents or any other family members of not having done anything for the United States, Ibrahim says. I could be the example, and they could point to me and say, "Look, that's our son, and he served in the military." Ibrahim Hashi. Ibrahim's behavior could be understood from a motivational perspective. For example, you might argue that he was operating at one of the most basic levels in Maslow's hierarchy, trying to secure safety needs. But what else might have been driving his decision to join the Marines? Think about how you would feel as you watched news reports about murders, assaults. Think about how you would feel as you watched news reports about murders, assaults, vandalism, and threats targeting your religious or ethnic group. Perhaps you belong to a group that has been targeted in such a way. How might emotions shape your behaviors? What are emotions? Motivation and emotion are tightly intertwined. Emotions can motivate behaviors, helping others when you're feeling happy, and motivation can influence emotions, feeling disappointed. Emotions can motivate behaviors, helping others when you're feeling happy, and motivation can influence emotions, feeling disappointed when you are not motivated to complete
unimportant task. In fact, the words emotion and motive have similar roots. Emotion can be traced to the Latin word emovere, which means to move out, remove, agitate. Emotion ND, whereas motive is related to the Latin word movere, meaning to move, motive ND. But how do psychologists define emotions? L09, define emotions and explain how they differ from moods. An emotion is a psychological state that includes a subjective or inner experience. In other words, emotion is intensely personal. We cannot actually feel each other's emotions firsthand. Emotion also has a physiological component. It is not only in our heads. For example, another can make you feel hot, anxiety might cause sweaty palms, and sadness may sap your physical energy. Finally, emotion entails a behavioral expression that is often apparent in the face. We scream and run when frightened, gag in disgust, and shed tears of sadness. Think about the last time you felt joyous. What is your inner experience? What is your inner experience of that joy? How did your body react? And what would someone notice about your behavior? We described emotion as a subjective, psychological state that includes both physiological and behavioral components. But are these three elements, psychology, physiology, and behavior, equally important? And how do they interact? Such questions are being explored by people from many fields and perspectives, according to Davidson, ETAL 2002, Ekman 2016. In fact, the very definition of emotion is a subject of academic debate, according to Cohen 2010 and Ekman 2016. Most psychologists agree that emotions are different from moods. Emotions tend to be strong, but they generally don't last as long as moods. And they are more likely to have an identifiable cause. An emotion is initiated by a stimulus, and it is more likely than a mood to motivate someone to action. Moods are longer-term emotional states that are less intense than emotions and do not appear to have distinct beginnings or ends. Farmer and Matlin, 2019, Kameni and Shetiuk, 2008, and Oatley, ETAL 2006. Here's an example to clarify. Imagine your mood is happy, but a car cuts you off on the highway, creating a negative emotional response like anger. Fortunately, this flash of anger is likely to vanish as quickly as it appeared, and your happy mood persists. Language and emotion. Think about all the words you can use to communicate subtle differences in emotions. I feel angry at you conveys a slightly different meaning than I feel resentful of you or I feel annoyed by you. Words not only facilitate communication, they also influence our perceptions of emotions and perhaps even emotional experiences. According to Lindquist, ETAL 2015, page 99. Imagine that diamonds were called doodle boogers. Do you think they would inspire the same emotions as diamonds? The English language includes about 200 words to describe emotions, but does that mean we are capable of feeling only 200 emotions? Probably not. While closely linked, words and emotions are not one and the same. Their relationship has captivated the interest of linguists from fields as different as psychology, anthropology, and evolutionary biology, according to Majid, 2012. Rather than focusing on words or labels, scholars typically characterize emotions along different dimensions. U.S. psychologist Carol Izard, 1923 through 2017, suggested we can describe emotions according to valence and arousal, according to Izard, 2007, figure 9.5. The valence of an emotion refers to how pleasant or unpleasant it is. Happiness, joy, and satisfaction are on the pleasant end of the valence dimension. Anger and disgust are on the unpleasant end. The arousal level of an emotion describes how active, excited, and evolved
The arousal level of an emotion describes how active, excited, and involved a person is while experiencing the emotion, as opposed to how calm, uninvolved, or passive they may be. With valence and arousal level, we can compare and contrast emotions. Feeling relaxed has a low arousal level and a positive valence. Fear, on the other hand, is characterized by high arousal and negative valence. Let's explore this emotion with a little help from Ibrahim. Figure 9.5 Dimensions of emotion. Emotions can be compared and contrasted according to their valence, how pleasant or unpleasant they are, and their arousal level. Intersecting vertical and horizontal axis divided the circle into 4 quadrants. The left horizontal axis is labeled unpleasant. The right horizontal axis is labeled pleasant. The upper vertical axis is labeled high arousal. The bottom vertical axis is labeled low arousal. Labeled data points are plotted within the circle within different quadrants. The data points read as follows. The emotions in the first quadrant, high arousal, pleasant, are as follows: astonished, ecstatic, excited, amused, happy, delighted, glad, pleased. The emotions in the second quadrant, high arousal, unpleasant, are as follows: alarmed, afraid, angry, tense, frustrated, annoyed, distressed. The emotions in the third quadrant, low arousal, unpleasant, are as follows: miserable, sad, depressed, gloomy, bored, droopy. The emotions in the fourth quadrant, low arousal, pleasant, are as follows: content, satisfied, serene, at ease, calm, relaxed, tired, sleepy. I don't even know if I'm still alive. Fortunately for Ibrahim, his first 2 deployments to Iraq were not extremely violent, as he spent much of the time working as an entrepreneur. Fortunately for Ibrahim, his first 2 deployments to Iraq were not completely violent, as he spent much of the time working as an interpreter. His 7-month tour in Afghanistan was quite a different story. My Afghan deployment, my last one, was the most violent, he says. I definitely felt my life was in danger most of the time. It wasn't the combat that scared him. Training kicks in, he explains. You're almost a robot during the actual firefight. It was the aftermath that terrified him, seeing the injuries and deaths and realizing just how close he had come to dying himself. A dangerous time. Ibrahim Hashi, during one of his deployments in the Middle East. I remember this one time we were on top of a roof in Afghanistan. We were in a firefight all day, pretty much, he explains. Towards the end of the day, we thought everything was over. We're coming down off the roof, we're ready to bed down for the night. As Ibrahim relaxed and sipped water, thinking he was safe, a group of Taliban fighters snuck up on the marine compound ready to ambush. Fortunately for Ibrahim, someone detected them. A fighter jet dropped from the sky and did a gun run, raining bullets on the enemy. At this point, I don't even know if I'm still alive, Ibrahim says. My body froze, I couldn't move, I was breathing so fast. I was starting to get lightheaded, and I could almost feel myself starting to black out. Feeling it in your body. 5 minutes later, when Ibrahim realized what had occurred, the fighter jet had saved them. His heart was still pounding and his hands were shaking. The fight or flight response had taken hold. When faced with a crisis situation, stress hormones are released into the blood, breathing rate increases, the heart pumps faster and harder, blood pressure rises, the liver releases extra glucose into the bloodstream, and blood surges into the large muscles. All these physical changes prepare the body for confronting or fleeing the threat, hence the expression fight or flight. But fear is not the only emotion that involves dramatic physical changes. Tears Tears pour from the eyes during intense sadness and joy. Anger is associated with sweating, elevated heart rate, and heightened blood flow to the hands, apparently in anticipation of a physical confrontation, according to Ekman 2003. Connections in the biology and behavior chapter, we explain how the sympathetic nervous system prepares the body to respond to an emergency, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system brings the body back to a non-crisis mode through the rest and digest process. Here we learn how the autonomic nervous system is involved in physiological experiences of emotion. LO10 lists the major theories of emotion and describe how they differ. Most psychologists agree that emotions and physiology are deeply intertwined, but they have not always agreed on the precise order of events. What happens first? Body changes associated with an emotion or the emotion itself. That's obvious. You may be thinking emotions occur first and then the body responds. U.S. psychologist William James would have begged to differ. James Lang theory in the late 1800s, William James 1842 through 1910, and Danish physiologist Carl Lang 1834 through 1900 independently derived similar explanations. In the late 1800s, William James, 1842 through 1910, and Danish physiologist Carl Lang, 1834 through 1900, independently derived similar explanations for emotion. James, 1890 and 1983, Lang and James, 1922. The James Lang theory of emotion suggests that a stimulus initiates a physiological reaction, for example, increased heart and breathing rates, and or a behavioral reaction, crying or striking out before we feel an emotion. Infographic 9.2. Emotions do not cause physiological or behavioral reactions as common sense might suggest. Instead, we feel sorry because we cry, angry because we strike, afraid because we tremble, according to James 1890 and 1983, page 1066. In other words, changes in the body and behavior pave the way for emotions. Our bodies automatically react to stimuli, and awareness of this physiological response leads to the subjective experience of emotion. As proponents of the James Lang theory explain, feelings are the consequences feelings are the consequences, not the causes of emotional behavior and bodily response. According to Laird and LaCase, 2014, page 32. How might the James Lang theory apply to Ibrahim's experience? It all begins with a stimulus, in this case, the unexpected sound of a jet engine and machine guns overhead. Next occur the physiological reactions, increased heart rate, faster breathing, and so on, and the behavioral responses, freezing in Ibrahim's case. Finally, the emotion registers. He feels fear. Imagine that for some reason Ibrahim had no physiological reaction to the sound. Would he still experience the same degree of terror? According to the James Lang theory, no. Critics contend that the James Lang theory cannot fully explain emotions because 1. People who are incapable of feeling physiological reactions as a result of surgery or spinal cord injuries, for example, can still experience emotions. 2. The speed of an emotion is faster than physiological changes. And 3. When physiological functioning is altered through a hormone injection, for instance, emotions do not necessarily change, according to Bard, 1934, Cannon, 1927, and Hilgard, 1987. In one experiment, researchers used surgery to stop animals from becoming physiologically aroused, yet the animals continued to exhibit behaviors associated with emotions such as growling and posturing, according to Cannon, 1927. Cannon-Bard theory. A prominent critic of the James Lang theory was U.S. physiologist Walter Cannon, 1871 through 1945, whose research on hunger was mentioned earlier in the chapter. Cannon and his student Philip Bard, 1898 through 1977, believed the James Lang theory could not explain all emotions. Bard, 1934, Cannon, 1927. The Cannon-Bard theory of emotion suggests that we do not feel emotion as a result of physiological and behavioral reactions. Instead, the emotions and the body responses occur simultaneously. Infographic 9.2, the starting point of this response is a stimulus in the environment. Let's use our knowledge of the brain and the cannon-barred theory to understand what happened to Ibrahim. The sudden sound and appearance of a fighter jet activated sensory neurons in his ears, eyes, and perhaps his skin through touch receptors detecting the engine's wind. The sensory information passed through the thalamus, where it was split in two directions, one to the cortex and the other to the limbic system. Activity in the cortex created Ibrahim's perception of the fighter jet, while his limbic system activated a physiological and behavioral response, causing his heart to race and his breathing to increase. As all this was happening, he experienced an emotion. The emotion and physiological reaction occurred simultaneously. How would you feel? This is a screenshot of a video taken by a hiker in Utah. The charging mountain lion got extremely close but did not attack, perhaps because the hiker kept his cool, slowly backing away and talking loudly, according to Brito 2020. If you were this person, what would you experience first? The emotion of fear, a physiological response, increased heart rate, or a behavioral reaction, flinching? The cannon-barred theory of emotion suggests that all these events would occur simultaneously. Critics of the cannon-barred theory suggest the thalamus might not be capable of carrying out this processing on its own, as other brain areas may contribute, according to B.B. Center 1951 and Hunt 1939. Emotions are processed in many areas of the brain, including the limbic system and prefrontal cortex, according to Kolb and Wishaw 2015 and Northoff et al. 2009. Connections. In the biology and behavior chapter, we introduce the limbic system, a group of interconnected structures that play an important role in emotion, motivation, and memory. It also fuels basic drives such as hunger and sex. The limbic system includes the thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. How does cognition fit in? U.S. psychologists Stanley Schachter, 1922 through 1997, and Jerome E. Singer, 1934 through 2010, also took issue with the James Lange theory, primarily because different emotions do not always have distinct and recognizable physiological responses, according to Schachter and Singer, 1962. They suggested there is a general pattern of physiological arousal caused by the sympathetic nervous system, and this pattern is common to a variety of emotions. The Schachter-Singer theory of emotion proposes that the experience of emotion is the result of two factors: one, physiological arousal, followed by two, a cognitive label for this physiological arousal. According to this theory, if you experience physiological arousal but don't know why it has occurred, you will label the arousal and explain your feelings based on your knowledge of the environment and previous experiences. Depending on the cognitive aspects of the situation, you may label the physiological arousal as joy, fear, anxiety, fury, or jealousy, according to Schachter and Singer, 1962, page 382, infographic 9.2. To test their theory, Schachter and Singer injected participants, male college students, with either epinephrine to mimic physiological reactions of the sympathetic nervous system, increased blood pressure, respiration, heart rate, and so on, or a placebo. The participants were left in a room with a stooge, a Confederate secretly working for the researchers, who was either euphoric or angry. When the Confederate behaved euphorically, the participants who had been given no explanation for their physiological arousal were more likely to appear happy or report feeling happy. When the Confederate behaved angrily, participants were more likely to appear angry or report feeling angry. It was clear that the participants who did not receive an explanation for their physiological arousal could be manipulated to feel either euphoria or anger, depending on the emotion displayed by the Confederate. The participants who were accurately informed about side effects did not show signs or report feelings of euphoria or anger. Instead, they attributed their physiological arousal to the side effects clearly explained to them at the beginning of the study, according to Schachter and Singer, 1962. Some have criticized the Schachter-Singer theory suggesting that it overstates the link between physiological arousal and the experience of emotion, according to Resenzian, 1983. What's more, studies have shown that people can experience an emotion without labeling it, especially if neural activity sidesteps the cortex and heads straight to the limbic system, according to Dimberg et al. 2000 and Lazarus 1991a. We will discuss this process in the upcoming section on fear, cognitive appraisal, and emotion, rejecting the notion that emotions result from cognitive labels of physiological arousal. U.S. psychologist Richard Lazarus, 1922 through 2002, suggested that emotion stems from the way people appraise or interpret the interactions they have, according to Lazarus, 1984 and 1991a. It doesn't matter if we can label an emotion or not, we experience the emotion nonetheless. Emotions such as happiness, anxiety, and shame are universal, and we don't need an agreed upon label or word to experience them. And babies, for example, can feel emotions long before they are able to label them with words. Lazarus also suggested emotions are adaptive because they feel us cope with our surroundings. In a continuous feedback loop, our appraisals or interpretations of the environment to change, causing changes in emotions. According to Folkman and Lazarus 1985 and Lazarus 1991b, this is the foundation of the cognitive appraisal approach to emotion, infographic 9.2, which suggests that the appraisal causes an emotional reaction. In contrast, the Schachter-Singer theory asserts the arousal comes first and then has to be labeled, leading to the experience of an emotion. Hot tempers. A man scuffles with police on a summer day in Australia. Hot tempers have been associated with increased aggression, both in laboratory and real-world settings, and researchers suspect that violent crime will increase as global warming continues, according to Plante and Anderson 2017. If you find yourself angry on a hot day or any, take a moment and focus on your breathing. Researchers have shown that just a single meditation session can help reduce the physiological responses to anger, according to Fennell et al. 2016. Responding to the cognitive appraisal approach, Polish-born U.S. psychologist Robert Jet. Responding to the cognitive appraisal approach, Polish-born U.S. psychologist Robert Sajonc, 1923 through 2008, suggested that thinking is not always involved when we experience an emotion. Emotions can precede thoughts and may even cause them, according to Sionce, 1980 and 1984. Sionce also suggested we can experience emotions without interpreting environmental circumstances. Emotion can influence cognition, and cognition can influence emotion. As you may have noticed, there is substantial disagreement about what role cognition plays in the experience of emotion. The relationship is complex and bidirectional, as thoughts can influence emotions, and emotions can impact memories, perceptions, interpersonal relationships, and physiological. The relationship is complex and bidirectional, as thoughts can influence emotions, and emotions can impact memories, perceptions, interpersonal relationships, and physiology, according to Farb et al. 2013 and Forgas 2008. Introductory text reads, imagine you are swimming and you think you see a shark. Fear pierces your gut, sending your heart racing as you swim frantically to shore, or is it actually your churning stomach and racing heart that cause you to feel so terrified? And what part, if any, do your thoughts play in this process? Psychologists have long debated the order in which events lead to emotion. Let's compare four major theories, each promising a different sequence of events. James Lang, body changes lead to emotions. A shark labeled stimulus leads to a heart labeled physiological response, which leads to star-shaped call-out with the text fear and exclamation mark beside labeled emotion. Canon Bard, body changes and emotions happen together. A shark labeled stimulus branches to a heart labeled physiological response and a star-shaped call-out with the text fear and an exclamation mark beside labeled emotion. Schachter Singer, our thoughts about body changes lead to emotions. A shark labeled stimulus leads to a heart labeled physiological response, which leads to a human silhouette with the text I am scared labeled cognitive, which further leads to a star-shaped call-out with the text fear and an exclamation mark beside labeled emotion. Cognitive appraisal, our thoughts about our situation lead to emotions. A shark labeled stimulus leads to a human silhouette with text I'm scared, which leads to a star-shaped call-out with the text fear and an emotion. A shark labeled stimulus leads to a human silhouette with text I'm scared, which leads to a star-shaped call-out with the text fear and an exclamation mark labeled emotion. A legend at the bottom reads as follows: an image of a shark with accompanying text that reads stimulus. External situation: an image of a heart with accompanying text that reads physiological response, physical changes. For fear, preparing body for threat, heart pounds, muscles contract, breathing changes. A human silhouette with accompanying text that reads cognitive activity, evaluation of the situation and or labeling the physiological response. A star-shaped call-out with the text fear and an exclamation mark beside, and accompanying text reads emotion, subjective experience, fear. As you may have noticed, there is substantial disagreement about what role cognition plays in the experience of emotion. The relationship is complex and bidirectional, as thoughts can influence emotions and emotions can impact memories, perceptions, interpersonal relationships, and physiology, according to Farb et al. 2013 and Forgas 2008. Think about a recent life event and choose two theories of emotion to explain your emotional experience. Which theory works best in this particular case? You made it through the theories of emotion, not an easy topic. Now let's find out how one of the concepts we covered relates to your life. Real life. You learn that certain physiological changes are likely to occur when a person experiences emotion. By measuring these internal changes, can we get inside the mind of a human and determine if they are lying? This is the basic premise of the polygraph or lie detector test. Didn't see that coming. Just how accurate are polygraph tests? Since its introduction in the early 1900s, the polygraph has been used by government agencies for a variety of purposes, including job screening, crime investigation, and spy identification. According to Hart 2020, Nelson 2014, the polygraph machine works by measuring aspects of physiological arousal presumed to be associated with deceit. When people lie, they often experience changes in breathing rate, blood pressure, and other variables controlled by the autonomic nervous system, according to Nelson 2014. By monitoring these variables, the polygraph can theoretically detect when a person is being deceitful. But here's the problem. These biological changes do not always go hand in hand with deception. There are many other reasons one might experience them while taking a polygraph, among them fear, anxiety, anger, and many medical or mental conditions. According to Roski 2013, page 260, estimates of polygraph accuracy are sometimes as high as 90%. However, critics contend that studies often cited to justify polygraph use are riddled. However, critics contend that studies often cited to justify polygraph use are riddled with methodological. However, critics contend that studies often cited to justify polygraph use are riddled with methodological. However, critics contend that studies often cited to justify polygraph use are riddled with methodological problems and have not been subjected to proper peer review, according to Kutsoglu 2021, Nelson and Handler 2013, and Roski 2013. Some researchers have serious doubts about the validity of polygraph testing, noting its weak scientific basis and unknown error rate, according to Lacono and Ben Shashker, 2019, page 86. One possible alternative is fMRI lie detection, but researchers have yet to identify patterns of brain activation that reliably distinguish truth-telling from deceit, according to Schmidt, 2018. Research Connections. In Chapter 1, we discuss the validity of psychological experiments and how it depends on the accuracy of the measures used. If these assessments are reliable and valid, they consistently measure what they intend to measure. Here we discuss the polygraph, which measures physiological variables presumed to be associated with lying. These variables may not always be associated with deception, however. Connections. In the Biology and Behavior chapter, we describe how fMRI technology tracks the flow of oxygen-rich blood in the brain, revealing which areas are active. Here, we learn how researchers are trying to use this technology to detect lying. Think critically. Can you spot a liar? Without accurate scientific tools, is there any surefire way to recognize dishonesty? Many people think they can intuit if someone is lying. Many people think they can intuit if someone is lying through simple observation, but research suggests they should not be so confident. Research has shown that people, including trained police officers, only perform around chance level in detecting deception, according to Bogard ETAL 2016, page 1. In other words, our lie detection accuracy is not much better than 50%, according to Schmidt 2018. Why are we so bad at sniffing out dishonesty? One reason is that we over-rely on nonverbal cues like shifty eyes, changes in posture, and other body movements, behaviors that are generally not good indicators of deceit, according to Bogard and Meijer 2022 and DePaulo ETAL 2003, as well as Ridge ETAL 2019. Rather than focusing on the face and body, we might have better luck examining the content of the message, that is, what the person is saying, according to Ridge ETAL 2019. When judging the veracity of a claim, you might consider asking questions like this. 1. Does the information fit together logically? People who are lying generally tell less a coherent story, according to Bogard ETAL 2016, page 2. 2. Does the person provide details suggestive of a real memory? Truth tellers are more inclined to report sensory tidbits. The cafe was dimly lit and smelled of croissants, and information about the relative location of people and objects in space. Mary Cruz was sitting at the table to the right of the bathroom, according to Bogard ETAL 2016. 3. Does the claim conflict with known facts? A good way to catch someone in a lie is to get them to say something verifiably untrue, according to Ormerod and Dondo 2015. Suppose a person claims to have attended the University of Wisconsin, UW, but you have reason to believe this is false. Being familiar with the UW campus, you know many students enjoy warm days at the Union Terrace where they can eat an unusual flavor of ice cream, orange custard, chocolate chip. You could ask the person about popular students, hangouts, and unusual desserts sold at the student union. Lying eyes. A common misconception is that people look away when they aren't telling the truth. Actually, liars may be more inclined to engage in deliberate eye contact, according to Mann et al. 2012. Researchers say there are two reasons for this. One, liars want to come across as more believable, and apparently they think looking a person in the eyes will do the trick. And two, they want to gauge the response of the person listening to their lies. Do they believe me? According to Vridge et al. 2019. What's the bottom line? Researchers continue to study ways that liars betray their dishonesty, but research to date seems to suggest that paying attention to verbal information as opposed to nonverbal cues may be the best strategy. Recognizing dishonesty may not be our forte, but we are pros at identifying basic emotions like happiness, anger, and fear. Face value. Think about the clues you rely on when trying to read other people's emotions. Think about the clues you rely on when trying to read other people's emotions. Think about the clues you rely on when trying to read other people's emotions. Where do you look for signs of anger, sadness, or surprise? It's written all over their face, of course. Sir, something bad is about to happen. To stay safe in wartime, you need to be one step ahead of your enemy. That's why Ibrahim and his platoon mates often seized radios from defeated Taliban fighters and used the devices to eavesdrop on enemy communications. The Marines couldn't understand the Taliban's language, so they relied on allies in the Afghan army to interpret. But sometimes verbal translation wasn't even necessary. Ibrahim remembers a specific instance during a mission in the Musa Qala district in Helmand province. His Afghan colleague heard something on the radio, and his face immediately transformed. Just by looking at the soldier's face, Ibrahim knew they were in trouble. Sir, something bad is about to happen, the soldier said. Moments later, their platoon was ambushed. LO11 discussed evidence supporting the idea that emotions are universal. How did human beings become such experts in reading facial expressions? Writing in the expression of the emotions in man and animals, 1872 and 2002, Charles Darwin suggested that this is not a learned ability, but rather an innate characteristic that evolved because it promotes survival. Sharing the same facial expressions allows us to communicate critical information like the presence of danger. If facial expressions are truly innate and universal, then people from all cultures ought to interpret them in the same way. A happy face should look much the same all over the world, from the United States to the Pacific island of New Guinea. Can you guess how they feel? Players from the German men's national soccer team display the same physical response during the match that led to their elimination from the 2018 World Cup. Why do athletes reflexively put their hands on their heads when they miss a shot? Some psychologists believe this behavior is a universal display of shame, a signal to others that you know you messed up. According to Gendelman, 2018, paragraph 6, expressions of shame and pride are relatively consistent across cultures and observed in both blind and sighted individuals, suggesting that these displays may be innate, according to Tracy and Matsumoto, 2008. Ekman's faces. Some 5 decades ago, U.S. psychologist Paul Ekman traveled to a remote mountain region of New Guinea to study an isolated group of indigenous people. Ekman and his colleagues were very careful in selecting their participants, choosing only those who were unfamiliar with Western facial behaviors. These signature facial expressions we equate with basic emotions like disgust and sadness. The participants didn't speak English, nor had they watched Western movies, worked for anyone with a Caucasian background, or lived among Westerners. The study went something like this. The researchers told the participants stories conveying emotions such as fear, happiness, and anger. in the story conveying fear. For example, a man sitting alone in his house with no knife, axe, bow, or any weapon to defend himself. Suddenly, a wild pig appears in his doorway, and he becomes frightened that the pig will bite him. Next, the researchers asked the participants to match the emotion described in the story to a picture of a person's face, choosing from 6 to 12 sets of photographs. The results indicated that the same facial expressions represent the same basic emotions across cultures, and this finding has been replicated approximately 200 times according to Ekman and Friesen, 1971, and Ekman and Keltner, 2014. And so it seems a happy face usually does look the same to people in the United States and to New Guinea. Further evidence for the universal nature of facial expressions is apparent in both children born blind. Although they have never seen a human face demonstrating emotion, their smiles and frowns are similar to those of sighted children. According to Galati ETAL 1997, and Matsumoto and Willingham 2009. Newer research based on artifacts from ancient Mesoamerica, a region reaching from Mexico to Central America, suggests that early people used emotional expressions easily recognizable to modern humans. For example, sculptures of people fighting in battles have angry faces, while war prisoners appear sad, according to Cohen and Keltner 2020. Universal expressions. A smile in Kenya on the top left means the same thing as a smile in Lithuania, top middle, or India on the top right. Facial expressions for other basic emotions such as sadness in the middle row and anger at the bottom row are also strikingly similar across cultures, according to Ekman and Friesen, 1971. Across the world, when to reveal, when to conceal. Although the expression of some basic emotions appears to be universal, culture acts like a filter, determining the appropriate context in which to exhibit them. A culture's display rules provide guidelines for when, how, and where an emotion is expressed. In the United States, where individualism prevails, people tend to be fairly expressive. Showing emotion, particularly positive emotions, is socially acceptable. This is less the case in the collectivist, community-oriented societies of East Asia, where concealing emotions is more the norm. Display rules are taught early in life as parents show approval or disapproval of children's emotional expressions, according to Sure ETAL 2019. For example, Korean and Asian American parents appear more inclined than European American parents to favor modesty and suppression of children's emotions. According to Louis ETAL 2013, page 429, why do collectivist cultures tend to discourage emotional displays? Showing emotions, particularly anger, can threaten the social harmony that is highly valued by their societies, according to Louis ETAL 2013. However, we cannot attribute all variations in display rules to collectivism and individualism because they are key distinctions. Within these two categories. For example, England and Australia, both considered individualistic, appear to have different expectations for expressing positive emotions like pleasure and triumph. As one study showed, the display rules for such emotions were stricter among English people, according to Medakara ETAL 2023. As this finding demonstrates, there are limits to how much we can understand culture through the lens of individualism and collectivism. Does smiling make you happy? As you probably noticed, facial expressions can have a dramatic impact on social interactions. If you walk into class with an angry frown, people are unlikely to approach you and say hi. A smile, on the other hand, tends to attract waves and hellos. Did you ever think about how your facial expressions might affect you? Believe it or not, the simple act of smiling can make a person feel happier. According to the facial feedback hypotheses, Facial expressions can impact the experience of emotions, according to Buck 1980, Coles ETAL 2019. If this hypothesis is correct, we should be able to manipulate our emotions with activities like the one in the try this below. Facial feedback. Holding a pen between your teeth on the left will probably holding a pen between your teeth as displayed on the picture on the left will probably put you in a better mood than holding it with your lips closed as displayed on the picture on the right. This is because the physical act of smiling, which occurs when you place the pen in your teeth, promotes feelings of happiness. So next time you're feeling low, don't be afraid to flex those smiling muscles. Try this. Take a pen and put it between your teeth, keeping your mouth open for about 30 seconds. Consider how you are feeling. Next, hold the pen with your lips, but don't let it touch your teeth for 30 seconds. Again, consider how you are feeling. If you are like many participants, holding the pen in your teeth should result in your perceiving objects and events in your environment as funnier than if you hold the pen with your lips, according to Marsh ETAL 2019 and Strack ETAL 1988. Why would that be? Take a look at the photo above to the left and note how the person holding the pen in her teeth seems to be smiling. The feedback of those smiling muscles leads to a happier mood. Types of emotions. Ibrahim witnessed disturbing sights and sounds in Iraq and Afghanistan, but violence was nothing new to a man who had spent some of his formative years in Somalia. After living in the United States until age 8 or 9, Ibrahim spent a few years in his family's homeland, which was mired in civil war. He remembers traveling through the city with his aunt when a firefight broke out between rival factions just meters away. His aunt ran for her life, leaving Ibrahim to fend for himself as bullets whizzed by his head. Fortunately, Ibrahim escaped the situation unscathed. But how do you think he felt afterward? Fear is the emotion that immediately comes to mind. But there may be others, including anger toward his aunt, disgust at the sight of blood, anxiety about his future safety, and gratitude toward those who helped him. Are such feelings common to all people? There may be a set of basic emotions, including fear, anger, happiness, sadness, and disgust or contempt, that are common to people of all cultures, according to Hoffman and Dewin, 2018, page 14. However, some who study facial expressions contend there are only 4 patterns of universally recognized emotions: happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, and disgust, and anger. According to Jack ETAL 2016, such emotions are considered basic because people all over the world experience and express them in similar ways. They appear to be innate and have an underlying neural basis, according to Izzard 1992. It is also noteworthy that unpleasant emotions, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness, have survived throughout our evolutionary history and are more prevalent than positive emotions such as happiness, surprise, and interest, according to Ekman 1992 and Forgas 2008, as well as Izzard 2007. This suggests that negative emotions have adaptive value. In other words, they may be useful in dangerous situations like those that depend. This suggests that negative emotions have adaptive value. In other words, they may be useful in dangerous situations like those that demand a fight or flight response, according to Adolphs 2013, Forgas 2008, and Friedman ETAL 2014. The biology of fear, LO12, described the amygdala's role in the experience of fear. What areas of the brain are active when you feel afraid? With the help of brain scanning technologies, researchers have zeroed in on an almond-shaped structure in the limbic system, according to Chang ETAL 2006 and Pepe and Pare 2010. This structure, known as the amygdala, is central to our experience of fear, according to Hariri ETAL 2002, Mendez Bertolo ETAL 2016, and Schaffner 2020. If a person views threatening images or even looks at an image of a frightened face, The amygdala is activated according to Chow et al. 2008, Lang et al. 2010, and Mendez-Bertolo et al. 2016. Pathways to fear. Anytime you are confronted with a fear-provoking situation, the amygdala enables an ultra-fast, unconscious response. Researchers have constructed various models to explain how this occurs, according to Schaffner 2020. According to one conceptualization, sensory information, sights, sounds entering the thalamus can either go to the cortex for processing or head straight for the amygdala without stopping at the cortex, according to Ledoux, 1996, 2000, 2012. The direct path going from the thalamus to the amygdala conveys raw information about the threat, enabling your brain and body to respond to danger without your awareness. Like a panic button, the amygdala issues an alert summoning other parts of the brain that play a role in the experience of fear, for example, the hypothalamus and medulla, which then alert the sympathetic nervous system. A pathway also goes to the pituitary gland, resulting in the secretion of stress hormones, according to Ledoux, 2012. Let's discover how this immediate fear response might play out using the example of Ibrahim. Visual information about the gunfight went directly to his thalamus and from there to his amygdala, triggering an alarm reaction. His heart and breathing rates increased, preparing him to flee the fight scene. Meanwhile, information sent to the sensory processing centers of his visual cortex resulted in a visual representation of the chaotic sense. Now suppose it had all been a false alarm. The conflict between the rival factions never escalated to violence, and the fighters dispersed. In this case, Ibrahim's cortex would have alerted the amygdala. False alarm, the scene is safe. The key fact to note is that it takes longer for neural information to go from the thalamus to the cortex than from the thalamus to the amygdala. This explains why you generally need a moment to calm down. The physiological reaction starts before the false alarm message from the cortex reaches the amygdala. Infographic 9.3. There appears to be an evolutionary advantage to having direct and indirect routes for processing information about potential threats. According to Ledoux, 2012, the direct route, thalamus to amygdala, causing physiological and emotional reactions, enables us to react quickly to threats for which we are biologically prepared. Snakes, spiders, aggressive faces. The pathway to the cortex allows us to evaluate more complex threats, nuclear weapons, job layoffs, overriding the fast response pathway when necessary. Introductory text reads, "You instantly recoil when you spot a snake, then sigh with relief just a moment later when it registers that the snake is a rubber toy. Have you ever wondered why you react with fear when a threat turns out to be nothing? Why does it take longer for you to process a threat than react to it? Sensory information, sight, sound, entering the brain travels to the thalamus and is then routed to the cortex for processing. Sensory information can also go directly to the amygdala. In the case of a threat, the amygdala alerts other areas of the brain and the doctrine system instantly without waiting for a conscious command. This enables a response to fear before you are even fully aware of what you are reacting to. A schematic shows a woman looking at a snake hanging in a branch. Parts of her brain are highlighted and labeled. Two ovoid structures attached to each other at the center are labeled thalamus. An almond-shaped structure attached at the end of a C-shaped structure is labeled amygdala, and a small region in the occipital lobe is labeled visual cortex. The pathways of the information through brain are as follows. The path from eyes to thalamus and its corresponding call-out reads: 1. Visual information goes directly to the thalamus. The path from the thalamus to amygdala is labeled direct path, and its corresponding call-out reads: 2. Basic information about threat is conveyed directly to amygdala, enabling rapid response. The path from the thalamus to visual cortex is labeled indirect cortex, and the corresponding call-out reads: 3. It takes longer for neural information to go to the visual cortex for processing. The path from the visual cortex to the amygdala is labeled information about threat, and a corresponding callout reads 4. If it's been determined that the threat is a false alarm, this message will instruct the amygdala to inhibit the fear reaction. A callout from the amygdala reads 5. After receiving information about threat, the amygdala instructs hypothalamus and medulla to alert sympathetic nervous system, prompts pituitary gland to secrete stress hormones. Amygdala leads to an illustration of an enlarged view of the coronal section of the brain. Amygdala leads to an illustration of an enlarged view of the coronal section of brain. 2 subcortical structures are highlighted in red on either sides of brain, just over the brain stem. Text below reads, the amygdala, shown here in red, plays a pivotal role in experiencing fear. Information about threats prompts the amygdala to activate the physiological responses that characterize fear. An illustration below depicts a mouse close to a cat. A call-out beside reads, what happens when the amygdala doesn't work? Animals with amygdala damage may not exhibit any response to a threat. For example, the mouse in this picture is uncharacteristically comfortable with a predator. Similarly, one study found that people with amygdala damage demonstrated an absence of expected fear behaviors, according to Feinstein et al. 2011. There appears to be an evolutionary advantage to having direct and indirect routes for processing information about potential threats. According to Lados, 2012, the direct route thalamus to amygdala, causing physiological and emotional reactions, enables us to react quickly to threats for which we are biologically prepared. Snakes, spiders, aggressive faces. The pathway to the cortex allows us to evaluate more complex threats, nuclear weapons, job layoffs, overriding the fast response pathway when necessary. How important is the amygdala? What happens to these automatic responses when the amygdala is not working? Studies in animals suggest that damage to the amygdala impairs the fear response, according to Bliss, Moreau, et al. 2011, Phillips and Ludo, 1992. Similarly, people with damage to the amygdala exhibit weaker than normal responses to stimuli that inspire fear or disgust, according to Buchanan, et al. 2004. They also have difficulty comprehending nonverbal behavior associated with emotion according to Adolphs, 2008. Now it's time to move on to brighter things. What makes you happy, and how might you become more content? Happiness. In Chapter 1 of this book, we introduce the field of positive psychology, the study of positive emotions, positive character traits, and enabling institutions. Seligman and Steen, 2005, page 410. Rather than focusing on mental illness and atypical behavior, positive psychology emphasizes human strengths and virtues. The goal is well-being and fulfillment, and that means satisfaction with the past, hope and optimism for the future, and flow and happiness at the current time, according to Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi, 2000. Let's take a moment and explore that third category, flow and happiness of the present. Master of flow, the late psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, making a funny face as his colleague Gian Nakamura laughs in the background. Csikszentmihalyi, 1934 through 2021, is famous for establishing the concept of flow and furthering our understanding of happiness. Didn't see that coming, going with the flow. People often make the mistake of viewing happiness as a goal they will attain at some point in the future. When all of life's pieces fall into place, once I start making a lot of money and buy a house, I will be happy. Or if I just lose 10 pounds, I will finally be content. What they don't realize is that happiness may be within grasp right here and right now. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting into the flow. Have you ever felt completely absorbed in a challenging task, guided by a focus so intense
that everything else, including the past and future, faded from awareness. Some call it being in the zone. Hungarian-born psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi Mihai Csikszentmihalyi referred to it as flow. According to Csikszentmihalyi 1999 and TSE ETAL 2022. For flow to occur, you might be engaged in a task that is intrinsically rewarding and challenging, but not so challenging that it makes you feel anxious, aware of what you need to accomplish from 1 minute to the next, and receiving feedback during the process. Csikszentmihalyi 1975-1999. Activities that lend themselves to flow include fun activities such as chess, rock, climbing, dancing, and composing music, but flow can also be achieved during more ordinary tasks associated with work and school, according to Culbertson ETAL 2015 and TSE ETAL 2022. In the classroom, you are most likely to experience flow while performing tasks that afford you some control and require active participation, such as individual assignments and group work, according to Chernoff ETAL 2003. So next time the opportunity arises, try to achieve flow by giving an activity your undivided attention and being fully present in the moment. You may become more interested in the material and enjoy the process. What's more, your positive experience may rub off on those around you, as flow appears to be somewhat contagious, according to Culbertson ETAL 2015. Flow is one of the secrets to achieving happiness, and it can be experienced by anyone. However, some of us seem more inclined toward happiness than others. Why is this so? LO13 summarized evidence pointing to the biological basis of happiness, the biology of happiness. To what degree do we inherit happiness? Heritability estimates are between 35% and 50%, and as high as 80% in longitudinal studies, according to Bartels 2015 and Ness ETAL 2010. In other words, a sizable proportion of the population-wide variation in happiness, life satisfaction, and well-being can be explained by genetic makeup as opposed to environmental factors. Research suggests that happiness may have a biologically based set point similar to the set point for body weight, according to Bartels ETAL 2010, Cummins ETAL 2014, and Lyubomirsky ETAL 2005. Happiness tends to fluctuate around this fixed level, which is influenced by genes and related to temperament. But this is only a starting place and does not mean that we cannot increase our happiness. Connections. In the Human Development chapter, we describe some of the temperaments exhibited by infants. About 40% can be classified as easy babies, meaning they are relatively happy and easy to soothe, follow regular schedules, and quickly adjust to changes in the environment. This early evidence of temperament lends support to the biological basis of happiness discussed here. Some researchers suggest that the set point theory fails to account for the variety of events that impact well-being over a lifetime. One such event is marriage. Research suggests that people who are married tend to have higher levels of life satisfaction, particularly those who consider their partners to be their best friends, according to Grover and Helliwell 2019. Increasing happiness. That being said, the happiness brought about by positive life events does not seem to last forever, according to Diner ETAL 2006 and Mancini ETAL 2011. We tend to become quickly habituated to events that make us feel happy. If you win the lottery, get a new job, or buy a beautiful house, you will likely experience an increased level of happiness for a while, but then go back to your baseline or set point of happiness, according to Lyubomirsky ETAL 2005. Circumstances that feel new and improved or life-changing quickly become mundane, suggesting that happiness will not be found in new possessions or shopping sprees. The implication is that we need to be careful when pursuing happiness as a goal in life, as we don't want to emphasize obtaining a specific outcome.
like moving to a house near the ocean or acquiring a desired object, according to Liebermersky, ETAL 2005. Rather than trying to become happier, we should be content with what we have, according to Liebermersky, ETAL 2011. Connections in the learning chapter, we present the concept of habituation, a basic form of learning wherein repeated exposure to an event generally results in a reduced response. This same effect can occur with events resulting in happiness. With repeated exposure, we habituate to events that initially elicited happiness. With this in mind, there are many steps you can take to maximize enjoyment of your life. Right now, infographic 9.4, engaging in physical exercise, cultivating close relationships with family and friends, and being generous with others have all been linked to greater happiness. According to Dunn ETAL 2014, Helliwell ETAL 2018, Lathia ETAL 2017, and Park ETAL 2017. The same can be said for counting your blessings, according to Emmons ETAL 2019, and Kretsch ETAL 2016. In one study, participants were asked to write in a diary each day, identifying what they were most grateful for. The researchers measured well-being and found that the participants in the diary group were better off than those who didn't count their blessings. Members of the diary group were also more likely to report that they had helped or offered emotional support to another person, according to Emmons and McCullough, 2003. As this study shows, simple intentional changes in one's thoughts and behaviors can precipitate meaningful increases in happiness, according to Liebermersky and Layas, 2013, page 60. We should also repeat experiences we enjoyed the first time. Watching a movie, reading a book, playing a game, or visiting a museum can bring happiness time and time again, according to O'Brien, 2019. Infographic 9.4, Pathways to Happiness. Introductory text reads, when it comes to being happy, there is no magic bullet, but the latest research suggests we may be able to cultivate positive emotions and well-being through a variety of activities, many which do not involve spending money. That being said, money does play a role, and it's not so much about how much you have, but how you choose to use it. The infographic shows a man at the center with a dashed outline pointing toward different pathways. The pathways to happiness, yes, are as follows. Prioritizing relationships, cultivating deep and meaningful relationships with family and friends seems to bolster happiness. According to Helliwell ETAL 2018, going to college, higher levels of education have been linked to greater happiness. According to Asari 2019, achieving flow while studying, working, and pursuing an interest allow yourself to become completely absorbed in challenging and rewarding tasks. According to Chimiyasurti E 1999 and TSE ETAL 2022, buying time and paying for time-saving services such as grocery delivery is associated with greater life satisfaction, according to Willens ETAL 2017, page 8523. Being kind and generous, whether you are buying a gift or donating to charity, spending money on others is likely to increase your happiness, according to Aknin ETAL 2020 and Dunn ETAL 2014. Counting your blessings, being grateful for what you have, may lead to stress and greater well-being, according to Chopik ETAL 2019 and Gretsch's ETAL 2016. The pathways to happiness, are as follows. Becoming a millionaire, salary increases may boost happiness, but most data suggests that after basic needs have been met, additional income is not associated with increases in well-being, according to Gilner and Norton 2016, page 12. Buying new stuff, buying new things may provide temporary pleasure, but is unlikely to increase long-term happiness, according to Donnelly, ETAL 2016, and Lyabomirsky, ETAL 2005. The pathways to happiness are as follows. Moving your body. Evidence suggests that college students feel happier and less anxious when they exercise more, according to Kroenig, ETAL 2019. Buying experiences, investing in vacations, restaurant meals, and other activities is more likely to promote enduring happiness than purchasing material items, according to Gilovich and Kumar 2015. Ivan Maskura Schmidt, displayed on the left, and Ibrahim Hashi, displayed on the right. In a good place, you may be wondering how Ivan Maskura Schmidt and Ibrahim Hashi are doing these days. Ivan is in a good place, and she attributes that to her faith in God. Because I have that trust and that sense of hope, I can have peace, she says. I can be in the moment, and I can learn what I need to learn from that moment. When does Yvonne feel happiest? While running, of course. The greatest runs are those that take her through the beautiful outdoors. My breathing connects me to nature, she explains. I breathe out, and that's what the plants and trees and everything else take in. And they breathe in and out. And it's kind of this exchange of energy that is so free and open when you're outside. Ibrahim completed his service with the Marine Corps in 2011, enrolled in American University in Washington, D.C. in 2012, and graduated in 2016. Returning to civilian life was difficult, and it took him a long time to let go of the super-vigilant, hyper-aware mindset that once kept him alive in combat. Ibrahim isolated himself, avoiding interactions with people, even family members. During that readjustment period, his only lifeline was friendship with fellow Marines. Whenever I needed help, I would call them, and if they needed help, they would call me. Like many of his platoon mates, Ibrahim was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, psychological disorders chapter. But eventually he began talking about his experiences, and this helped him heal. It's not something I'd hide anymore, and it's not something I hide anymore, and honestly, that's been the best thing for me, he says. Now within the past year or so, I'm very happy. I'm content with life. What makes me happy is having a good, solid network of relationships, of friends and family members and loved ones. Show what you know. Question number 1. On the way to a wedding, get mud on your clothing. Describe how your mood and emotion might differ. Answers will vary, but can be based on the following definitions. Emotion is a psychological state that includes a subjective or inner experience. It also has a physiological component and entails a behavioral expression. Emotions are quite strong, but they don't generally last as long as moods. In addition, emotions are more likely to have an emotions are more likely to have an identifiable cause, that is a reaction to a stimulus that provoked it, which has a greater probability of motivating a person to take some sort of action. Moods are longer-term emotional states that are less intense than emotions and do not appear to have distinct beginnings or ends. It is very likely that on your way to a wedding, you are in a happy mood, and you have been that way for quite a while. If you were to get mud on your clothing, it is likely that you would experience an emotion such as anger, which might have been triggered by someone jumping in a large mud puddle and splashing you. Your anger would have a subjective experience. Your feeling of anger a physiological component. You felt your face flush with heat, and a behavioral expression. You glared angrily at the person who splashed you. Question number 2. Blank of a culture provide a framework for when, how, and where an emotion is expressed. Is the answer A, beliefs, B, display rules, C, feedback loops, or D, appraisals? The answer is B, display rules. Display rules of a culture provide a framework for when, how, and where an emotion is expressed. Question number 3. Name 2 ways that the Cannon-Bard and Schachter-Singer theories of emotion differ. Answers may vary. Refer to infographic 9.2. The Cannon-Bard theory of emotion suggests that environmental stimuli are the starting point for emotions and that body changes and emotions happen together. The Schachter-Singer theory of emotion suggests there is a general pattern of physiological arousal caused by the sympathetic nervous system, and this pattern is common to a variety of emotions. Unlike the Cannon-Bard theory, the Schachter-Singer theory suggests our thoughts about our body changes can lead to emotions. The experience of emotion is the result of 2 factors, physiological arousal and a cognitive label for this physiological state, the arousal. Cannon-Bard did not suggest that a cognitive label is necessary for emotions to be experienced. Question number 4. What evidence suggests that emotions are universal? Darwin suggested that interpreting facial expressions is not something we learn, but rather is an innate ability that Darwin suggested that interpreting facial expressions is not something we learn, but rather is an innate ability that evolved because it promotes survival. Sharing the same facial expressions allows for communication. Research on an isolated group of indigenous people in New Guinea suggests that the same facial expressions represent the same basic emotions across cultures. In addition, the fact that children born deaf and blind have the same types of emotional expressions as children with normal sensory abilities indicates that these displays and the emotions behind them may be universal. Question number 5. When people view images that are threatening or when they see faces of people who are afraid, the blank becomes active. Amygdala. When people view images that are threatening or when they see faces of people who are afraid, the amygdala becomes active. Question number 6. Happiness has heritability estimates as high as 80%. How would you explain this statement to a fellow student? Heritability is the degree to which heredity is responsible for a particular characteristic in a population. In this case, the heritability for happiness is as high as 80%, indicating that around 80% of the variation in happiness can be attributed to genes and 20% to environmental influences. In other words, we can explain a high proportion of the variation in happiness, life satisfaction, and well-being by considered genetic makeup as opposed to environmental factors. Chapter 9, Review, Summary of Concepts. LO1, Define Motivation. Motivation is a stimulus that can direct the way we behave, think, and feel. A motivated behavior tends to be guided, has a direction, energized, and persistent. When a behavior is reinforced, an association is established between the behavior and this consequence. With motivated behavior, this association becomes the incentive or reason to repeat the behavior. LO2, explain how extrinsic and intrinsic motivation impact behavior. When a learned behavior is motivated by the incentive of external reinforcers in the environment, there is an extrinsic motivation to continue that behavior. Intrinsic motivation occurs when a learned behavior is motivated by the prospect of internal reinforcers performing a behavior because it is inherently interesting or satisfying, exemplifies intrinsic motivation. The reinforcers originate from within. LO3, describe drive reduction theory and explain how it relates to motivation. The drive reduction theory of motivation suggests that human behaviors are driven by the need to maintain homeostasis, that is, to fulfill basic biological needs for nutrients, fluids, oxygen, and so on. If a need is not fulfilled, this creates a drive or state of tension that pushes us, motivates our behaviors to meet it. Once a need is satisfied, the drive is reduced, but not forever. The need inevitably returns, and you feel driven to meet it once again. LO4, explain how arousal theory relates to motivation. According to arousal theory, humans seek an optimal level of arousal or alertness and engagement in the world. What constitutes an optimal level of arousal is variable and depends on individual differences. Some people seem to be sensation seekers, that is, they seek activities that increase arousal. LO5, outline Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The needs in Maslow's hierarchy, often depicted as a pyramid, are considered universal and are ordered according to the strength of their associated drives. At the base of the hierarchy are physiological needs, which include requirements for food, water, sleep, and overall balance of body systems. Moving up the pyramid are increasingly higher level needs, safety, love, and belongingness, esteem, self-actualization, and self-transcendence. Maslow suggested that basic needs must be met before higher level needs motivate behavior. In some cases, people abandon their lower level needs to meet higher level needs. LO6, described the human sexual response as identified by Masters and Johnson. The human sexual response is the physiological pattern that occurs during sexual activity. Males and females tend to experience a similar cycle of excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution, but the duration of these phases varies from person to person. LO7, define sexual orientation and summarize how it develops. Sexual orientation refers to the identity of those we feel attracted to. It is a continuum that includes dimensions of sexuality, attraction, desire, and emotions. Research has focused on the causes of sexual orientation, but there is no strong evidence pointing to any one factor or factors. It results from an interaction between nature and nurture. LO8, discuss how the stomach and the hypothalamus makes us feel hunger. In a classic experiment, researchers confirmed that events in the stomach accompany hunger. When glucose levels dip, the stomach and liver send signals to the hypothalamus. When the lateral hypothalamus is activated, appetite increases. When the ventromedial hypothalamus is activated, appetite declines. LO9, define emotions and explain how they differ from moods. An emotion is a psychological state that includes a subjective or inner experience, a physiological component, and a behavioral expression. Emotions tend to be strong, but they generally don't last as long as moods. Emotions are more likely to have identifiable causes as reactions to stimuli, and they are more likely to motivate a person to action. Moods are longer-term emotional states that are less intense and do not appear to have distinct beginnings or ends. LO10, list the major theories of emotion and describe how they differ. The James Lange theory of emotion suggests that a stimulus initiates a physiological and or behavioral reaction, and this reaction leads to an emotion. The Cannon-Bard theory of emotion suggests that we do not feel emotion as a result of physiological and behavioral reactions. Instead, all these experiences occur simultaneously. The Schachter-Singer theory of emotion suggests that there is a general pattern of physiological arousal caused by the sympathetic nervous system, and this pattern is common to a variety of emotions. The experience of emotion is the result of two factors: one, physiological arousal, and two, a cognitive label for this physiological arousal. The cognitive appraisal theory suggests that emotion stems from the way people appraise or interpret the interactions they have. LO11 discuss evidence supporting the idea that emotions are universal. Darwin suggested that interpreting facial expressions is not something we learn, but rather an innate ability that evolved because it promotes survival. Sharing the same facial expressions allows for communication. Research on isolated indigenous peoples in New Guinea indicated that these same facial expressions represent the same basic emotions across cultures. In addition, children born blind have the same types of expressions of emotion, for example, happiness and anger, suggesting the universal nature of such displays. LO12 described the amygdala's role in the experience of fear. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure found in the limbic system that appears to be central to our experience of fear. When people view threatening images or even look at an image of a frightened face, the amygdala is activated. When confronted with a fear-provoking situation, the amygdala enables an ultra-fast and unconscious response. LO13 summarized evidence pointing to the biological basis of happiness. Happiness has heritability, estimates between 35% and 50%, and as high as 80% in longitudinal studies. There may be a set point for happiness or level around which our happiness tends to fluctuate. But this is only a starting place and does not mean that we cannot increase our happiness. Key terms: arousal theory, Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, cognitive appraisal approach, display rules, drive reduction theory, emotion, extrinsic motivation, facial feedback hypothesis, hierarchy of needs, homeostasis, incentive, instincts, intrinsic motivation, James Lang theory of emotion, motivation, need for achievement, NACH, need for power, NPOW, needs, Schachter-Singer theory of emotion, self-actualization, self-determination theory, SDT, set point. Chapter 10, Sexuality and Gender. The time now is 11:45 p.m. Today is Friday, July 10th, 2026. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.